Thank you all for coming together. We do apologize for the delay this morning. Before we get into the official agenda for the two-year committee, I would invite Asa to the podium to make an award.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So MAS, at our Wednesday night meeting, voted on and awarded our 2012-2013 academic year Advocate of the Year Award. It's our administrative award for administrators, faculty, or staff that we feel across the system have gone above and beyond for the students of the university system. So quickly, I'd like to mention everybody who was nominated. We had Colleen Hazen from MSU Great Falls. We had Marty Foxman, MSU Great Falls. We had Dean Wolf, MSU Great Falls. Kathy Meyer, MSU Great Falls. Now keep in mind there was a lot of Great Falls folks here, but that also goes to show the outstanding work that they're doing up here on this campus, and that their students really, really appreciate and also really love the amount of work that their administrators are doing for them. We had Matt Karras out of MSU, Rosie Keller at the University of Montana, Susan Hager at Helena College, Chancellor Limbaugh, MSU Northern, and Valerie Sperry, MSU Billings. Now, the award, the person that the award goes to received outstanding praise from everybody in MAS, regardless of the institution. We had students just absolutely from his institution talking about all of his help in the community, all of his help setting up programs for students, his help reaching out and engaging constituents, and his help also really rolling up the sleeves, his own sleeves, and working with campuses across the state, and in a really literal sense as well. So with that, I'd like to have Chancellor Limbaugh come forward, please.
For those of you who know me, being speechless is not one of my character traits. Thank you. When Tricia and I came, and I share this with my wife because she was in the dining hall building and creating, but more importantly, we came because we knew there was something special in Montana. And this tells me that the students here and the folks I work with here are among some of the most dedicated educators and the best students I've ever met. So this means more to me than I think you all realize. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chancellor. Congratulations, Chancellor Limbaugh. I think another indication that things are rolling in the right direction up on your campus. Thanks for your great work. Before we move on to our next item, I'd like to take a moment and welcome State Superintendent of Public Instruction Denise Juneau to the table. Always a pleasure to have you join us. She will be speaking with us later on in our morning agenda. I'd also like to welcome Terry Least in place of President Cruzado this morning. So now at this time, we've been talking since we got here Wednesday night about the departure of our student regent. And we've joked that when he leaves the table that the overall intellect of the board will sorely decline with his departure. But I think...
joke, but we're serious.
That's right. I think along with our sorrow at the loss of the magnificent contributions that he makes intellectually is the loss of a friend and an ally at the table who kept his counterparts, the students, first and foremost in every bit of his advocacy. It has been a pleasure for me to sit beside and to work with and to learn from Regent Teal. And I cannot say enough how sorely you will be missed by me, by all of us at this table, and by all of us in this room. And I would add that the next student regent has very big shoes to fill. You did something and so many things that were historic, one of which was being, I think, the first student regent to chair a committee. Congratulations to you for extraordinary leadership in that post. I know that you made a number of friends along the way, Dr. Seck being one of those friends. On behalf of the board, on behalf of all of the folks at the OCHI office, we'd like to present to you and to Biz, because she plays a key role, we know, in everything that you do and in the decisions that you make. A gift certificate for 2 nights at the Big Sky Huntley Lodge, plus compliments of Big Sky, $150, good towards golf, zip lining, food, or anything at the athletics store there. So, Regent Teal, you will be sorely missed, and we wish you all the best. And I think that we all in this room feel more confident about our future because you and Biz and your counterparts who are students sitting at the table today will be making the decisions that impact us in the future. Thank you so much for your service. Now, before any other comments in that regard, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Dr. Seck.
Regent Teal, I cannot thank you personally enough for the leadership that you have demonstrated over the past year in serving as the leader of the 2-year committee for the Board of Regents. Under your leadership, 2-year education in Montana has been transformed. So the 2-year leaders got together and had an idea because, as you recall, just a year ago at MSU Northern, we were engaged in a little discussion about renaming and rebranding. So we have a little gift for you. So Amy, if we have artifacts of not only the renaming and rebranding of the 7 colleges, but our 3 public community college partners have clothing wear for you as well. So Regent Teal, we don't know how you're going to get this to England, but you have enough clothes to wear for about 10 years.
And then there's more. President Engstrom?
Regent Teal, would you please join me and the other CEOs up at the podium for just one moment, please?
I still got his present right here. Put it in the box. Got his gift. I got him those copper cups from us. Mills and all the makings.
We just wanted to say on behalf of all of us on the University of Montana side of the system how much we have appreciated your efforts, and I want to illustrate that with 2 stories. When you first became student regent, it was just a matter of a couple of months, I think, where you contacted me and said, I need to come over and learn everything I can about the University of Montana, since you were obviously from Montana State. And so Regent Teal came over and spent a good day, maybe 2 days with us, attended a game, as I recall, and got indoctrinated into the Grizzly world. And so I so appreciated you reaching out to us to learn what you did. And I can say that throughout the last 2 years of your tenure, I have never had one moment of doubt that you were in support of the entire Montana University system and that you stood strong for everything that we value as a Montana University system. And then the second story, a year ago, we kicked off on our campus the Global Leadership Initiative. And we brought in a bunch of great keynote speakers, Joe Teo being one of those, and he wowed the audience with his stories of Engineers Without Borders and the kinds of things that he's been involved in to give himself his own global education. And so, Joe, on behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you for your service, and we want to present you with something as you go about your world travels. We want to make sure that you remember where you're from and what the state of Montana looks like. So here's a hand-drawn map from an artist in Missoula to give to you.
I really think I am speechless. I don't think I can really say what this experience has meant for me, both in the fact that I think we do a really, really important thing here, and it's been such an honor to be a part of that, but also because of the community of people. You know, I say the nice thing about higher education, there's a lot of smart and interesting people around, and that's more than true in Montana. There are some of the most dedicated, some of the best people I've ever met in this room who've been great mentors to me, great friends to me, and I appreciate it more than I can say. All the members of the board, and also Steve Barrett and Teresa Borenpol and Pat Williams, you are truly just incredible public servants, and I've learned so much from each of you and from how you present yourselves here and around the state. And then to Dr. Seck, to all of the commissioner's staff, we get way more out of the people in the university system than we really could ever expect, and it's been such an honor to serve. And then lastly, to President Grisato and President Engstrom and Clay, this is just interacting with you, seeing you work and be as excellent as you are at such challenging, difficult jobs has been amazing for me, has, I think, shifted my view of what I want to end up doing. And I'm not making any promises yet, but I really want to, I think, come back to Montana. And man, if any of you are retiring sometime soon, let me know. So, and finally, to all the students, I've made such incredible friends, such lasting friends, and higher education, I think, should be transformative, and it's been absolutely transformative for me, and that's been largely because of Kia and Lindsay and other friends at MSU and now from around the state who've pushed me, who've inspired me, and done so much more. So thank you all for all the praise, all the gifts, but this is a huge, huge team effort, and we're doing really good things, and it's been such a pleasure to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. I would say that the three of us better look for work. We're going to be outgunned, and that's for sure. Good luck on your journeys, and anything we can do, let us know along the way. Thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you. At this time, then, I would turn the mic over to Regent Teal to begin the conversation regarding two-year education and community college.
Let's see how I make this transition. So the two-year committee, I'm really excited about this agenda because we're bringing forward something that we updated the board on at our last meeting, the Developmental Education Reform Task Force. And this has really been, I think, a marathon in effort in that this is a huge, complex topic with a lot of nuance. And we brought together a great and dedicated team to do what, at the beginning, I think seemed pretty impossible, which was evaluate what we're doing now, evaluate best practices from around the country, and today bring forward a report that has some very specific recommendations for the board as to how we can both recognize where we're doing well in developmental education, but also suggest means of reform. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the committee that did so much work and to Dr. Seck to introduce the report.
Thanks, Regent Teal. This is a great day because back in October of 2012, the commissioner formed a statewide task force to take a look at this topic, and the commissioner charged us to review developmental education practices throughout the system. He asked us to make recommendations to the regents, and he asked us to examine current areas of innovation and success, as well as report on national research and best practices. The commissioner appointed a task force of 22 members, including representation from all ends of the system, the community colleges, to the MSU side, to the U of M side, faculty and staff, administration, as well as representation from OCHE. We also had representation from the Office of Public Instruction. We were very pleased to have Deputy Superintendent of OPI, Dennis Parman, with us, the Montana Digital Academy, and we also had representation from school districts in Montana. Interim Deputy Commissioner Moisey and I had the pleasure of co-chairing this task force. And soon after our first meeting, the task force was divided into 5 subcommittees, and they were Defining College Readiness, chaired by Dr. Heidi Pasick from Great Falls College, Assessment Placement Models, chaired by Professor Doug Downs from MSU, Developmental Education Models That Work for Montana, chaired by Leanne Frost of Great Falls College, Student Support, Advising and Implementation, chaired by Annalise Ripley from UM Western, and then Standards and Consistency Across the System, chaired by Sharon O'Hare, who is with us today. Dr. Moisey and I would like to thank all of the members of the task force for their hard work. And as Chairman Teal said, it was a lot of work to be done in a short amount of time. But Neil and I would especially like to thank Sharon O'Hare, the Assistant Vice President for Student Success at the University of Montana, because quickly her task force kind of began to evolve into the steering committee for the other 4 task force. And Sharon put in a huge amount of work on this. So I think it's only appropriate that Sharon present the summary of the task force. Sharon O'Hare.
Thank you, Dr. Seck. Members of the board, Chair McLean. It's my privilege today to report on behalf of the entire task force the results of the work that was set forth and the charge that was set forth for us by the commissioner and this board. I believe our first meeting was in December. So as Regent Teal refers to it as a marathon, it was a marathon done in a sprint time to get done. And so if I may invoke the invisible clicker to advance the PowerPoint, let us begin. As Dr. Seck said, this became one of the top priorities of the Regents' 2-year and Community College Committee. We were instructed to conduct a baseline analysis of all of the developmental education programs that take place across the system. We were also tasked with looking at the national picture of developmental education reform, and then finally to develop recommendations to the board. So this comes as no surprise to any of us that The need for remediation, the fact that a student is not ready to be successful in college level coursework reduces the likelihood of graduation. The other part of that is it also invariably increases the time to graduation. And as this nation looks at a tsunami of student loan debt, this becomes particularly relevant as something to address. From a national statistics standpoint, 34% of all new entering college students are required or placed into at least one remedial course. And the picture may be a little bit brighter here in Montana, but it's also compelling. 28.5% of our entering freshmen from Montana high schools enroll in at least one remedial course. That's down from 37% in 2006, so we are already making progress in this regard, but there is much more to do. So let me talk a little bit about the things that are already in place. And I think one of the wonderful things to come out of the task force work was the realization that there are so many developmental education reform work, there's so much work already being done. I'm not sure when we started this that we were all aware of each other's excellence, but I want to point to just a few examples, and this is by no means a comprehensive list. But at Flathead Valley Community College, we have an example of course acceleration in place. And that's one of the recommendations that the Complete College America folks said, is that you want to look at opportunities of accelerating, compressing the need for remedial coursework. These happen to be 2 math courses. We also have at Miles Community College course acceleration in the area of writing composition. Both RIT 015 and 095 are taught concurrently. At Western, they're removing the stop-out points. And by stop-out points, we mean that point at which a student makes the decision to continue on with their math work or to stop. And I tell you from someone that works a lot with freshmen that it's incredibly tempting and prevalent for a student to say, okay, I did my remedial math work. I would now like to take a break from math for a semester. And that semester becomes 2 semesters and 3, till finally we have students who are seniors still needing to take that one college-level math course in order to graduate. So at Western, they've combined both introductory and intermediate math, where they teach it over 2 blocks, but there's no stop out as an option for them. Another example is at Helena College, where they've embedded a co-requisite into RIT 101 and having RIT 096 as the co-requisite course. And at Gallatin College MSU, they integrate learning with basic skills and college success programs. One of the things we know about what makes a student ready for college, and I was speaking with Superintendent Juneau about this just a few minutes ago, is the fact that it's more than just being college content ready. It's more than being able to factor a second-degree polynomial. It's about having the understanding in place of what it means to be successful in college, the resiliency, the understanding that freshman year is not grade 13, that there are different norms and expectations. And we see Gallatin College addressing that by having their students take not only developmental math and writing, but also something called effective academic practices. There are also a number of pilot projects either underway or planned. And again, this is a testimony to the fact that across the system, we were not waiting for the results of this task force, that there's incredible things going on. Gallatin College, again, has both a lab and mastery-based option for survey of algebra, and there are a number of other courses that they're addressing in these innovative ways. Helena College and Great Falls College are accelerating and modularizing introductory algebra and intermediate algebra into one course. And Helena College is also embedding the co-requisite into an intermediate algebra course for college algebra. Highlands College is using a computerized learning system and looking at flipping the classroom, where the lecture is viewed outside of the classroom and the class time is spent working on problem sets and individual instruction by a facilitator instructor. The University of Montana Office for Student Success is spending this summer where we're having our incoming freshmen who are disappointed in their initial math placement score. If they would like to raise their score, they're going to enroll in a voluntary, free, 4-week online remediation program using an online delivery system called EdReady, and in addition to having the head of our math tutoring center serve as their online academic coach. EdReady is something that is being funded by the Gates Foundation. It's an initiative, and we are one of 3 states in the country that are serving as testing grounds for it. And then similarly in the fall, the University of Montana Math Science Department is embedding the EdReady remediation, which again is a customized remediation piece, as an online co-requisite for students needing moderate skills refresher in 4 math gateway courses. Writing, there are a number of colleges that are using a lab or co-requisite model to move more college-ready RIT 095 developmental writing students directly into college composition. We see a multidiscipline approach at Fort Peck Community College and MSU Northern, summer, bridge, and boot camps. Gallatin College, Helena College, and MSU Northern are all doing cohort and learning communities. So our task force recommendations to the Board of Regents. And what you'll notice is there is a certain theme that runs through a number of these recommendations, and that is the need for us to do a better job communicating not only within the system and the campuses, but also communicating to our affected parties, to our non-traditional students, to our incoming traditional age freshmen, to high school counselors, to parents, all of those people interested in what does it take to be college ready. Dr. Pasik's task force came up with this very streamlined, simple, but I like to think of it as a very pithy definition of what does it mean to be college ready. College ready students are those who have the academic and personal skills and behaviors to complete a college level course successfully without the need for developmental education. So our first recommendation addresses that need to do a better job talking to our incoming population of students, both students who are interested at a 2-year education and a certificate program as well as the 4-year. So we are proposing a partnership with the Office of Public Instruction to create a common college readiness communication platform. This platform would target both first-time high school freshmen and non-traditional adult learners, including those who are achieving their high school equivalency diploma. There are a variety of modes of delivering the kind of message. It's going to take more than just a simple website that you can refer people to. That's certainly one of them, but I believe we need to do a better job of being part of our high school partners, our K-12 partnerships, in terms of communicating this part of college readiness and what it takes to be college ready. Now that all high school juniors are taking the ACT test, we need to help them and their teachers understand what that ACT score says about their college readiness, including the strong recommendation that if the ACT score is somewhat on the low end, that we want to strongly encourage the student to take math as a senior in high school, and also the appropriate type of math depending upon their proposed program of study. Not everybody needs to take pre-calculus or calculus. They're not all on that college track. But there are different kinds of mathematics that are appropriate and that will prepare them for a college-level math course. And then the idea is to integrate into both this, the MUS and the OPI partnership, the High School to College Big Sky Pathways program, along with the Montana Career Information System. Our second recommendation is to create a common placement system across all campuses using multiple measures. I believe I mentioned this the last time I was here doing a presentation, but our inventory looked at probably 20 different types of placement systems across the system, ranging from an ALEX placement system that we use at the University of Montana, an in-house system at MSU Bozeman called MPlex, AccuPlacer, ACT scores, SAT scores, and even those campuses that use ACT or SAT scores for placement don't use the same threshold levels. You know, in an era now that we have common course numbering and, more importantly, we have common learning outcomes, it makes sense that a placement system, a common placement system, would be both feasible and advisable. I mean, we need to clear up the communication confusion that exists among our population of incoming students. I had a conversation with a mother a couple of weeks ago who didn't understand why her daughter needed to take the University of Montana placement test, which is ALEX, because even though her daughter had scored at a certain ACT level. And so that was a bit of a difficult explanation to say that we all are operating at somewhat different levels. And I think there's a need to move to that consistency. Another point to make that we'd want to make in a common placement system is that admission to college, achieving the MUS admission levels for ACT, is not synonymous with being ready for college level coursework. Okay. So as we look at this need for better communication and talking amongst ourselves, the task force felt that there is a need for separate developmental education gateway councils for math and reading and writing. One of the really interesting parts of work on this task force is we had representatives from both developmental writing, college level writing, developmental math, and college level math, all in the same room. And while there was a lot of value in terms of learning the particular issues that affect each one of those disciplines, in many cases they're very different. In some senses, college level reading and writing and the need for it exists along a continuum, while in mathematics is a little bit more nuanced because of what I referred to about not everyone is on the track for calculus. So again, we want to increase the communication, we want to share the results of these pilot projects and the good work that we're doing, and we want to look at course redesign, placement, and assessment. And we feel the best way to do that is by having these separate discipline councils, not just for developmental education, but for that continuum on to the gateway level course. The task force also recommends that instructors of developmental education have the same status across the system, that all of those who teach developmental education courses should be all developmental education courses should be taught by college faculty whose supervision is part of that integrated academic structure. We need to know how our students who take developmental education courses are doing. Not only how successful are they in those dev ed courses, but ultimately how successful are they in the follow-on gateway courses, what their time to degree is, and how many of them do go on to complete a certificate or some kind of degree. We don't have a system-wide monitoring of that in place, and our recommendation is that we establish those metrics. And looking at both their GPA, retention percentages, not only freshman to sophomore, but also sophomore to junior, and degree attainment, and as I said, time to degree, other metrics like credits earned to credit attempted ratios, those all come into play. We are recommending that the board create a policy that encourages timely completion of developmental education for those who require it. Our suggestion is that the board strongly recommend to all entering students who are placed in developmental math or writing that they register for those courses during their first semester, whether those courses are standalone developmental education courses or one of these blended courses that we're talking about with co-requisites. We're also recommending that the regents require that those students complete those initial courses by the end of the second semester. Now, if a student does not complete by the end of the second semester, we're not advocating suspension. What we are advocating, though, is some kind of programmed college-level intervention where we are not suspending, but we are advising and perhaps placing an advising hold on those students, a registration hold, so we can make sure they get the counseling that they need and get into the appropriate course. And again, we want the campuses to report to OCHE once a year regarding developmental education, completion, progression, and student success. We're recommending that as we look at performance-based funding, that a portion of those resources be set aside to support developmental education redesign and reformation, and we would recommend this with implementation of the fiscal year 16 performance funding allocation. So, the next step that we're recommending is the convening of a developmental education council that's tasked with moving forward and implementing these recommendations should the board choose to accept them, assessing the pilot and ongoing project outcomes, and reporting periodically to the Board of Regents on the program outcomes. And then where we've recommended policy changes, we're tasking that task force and a Board of Regents subcommittee with amending those board policies based on the recommendations with the target of May 2014. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Are there any questions, comments from members of the board? Yeah, Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question. This is, first of all, this is great work and how you've taken a look at all of the different campuses and how they work and what is unique to each one. I think it's good to keep in mind that's how our system in Montana works, is we've got a lot of different factors, and it isn't always easy to just do one size fits all. I understand your recommendations, though, for sometimes, especially with assessing where a student is at coming into our system, that might be streamlined. I think we need to keep in mind, though, that each campus does have different nuances, and so we have to be very cognizant of that. So that's one recommendation. The question I have is, in the recommendations that you have here, where do you discuss the type of and we heard this in the staff discussion too at the breakfast about the contact and assistance that advisors can provide to those students that are working on these remedial courses. I think that's something, in my experience, is so critical to have that contact, and so I think it's a real indicator of if they're going to be successful in completing these courses that are required.
Regent Robinson, thank you for that question. There was an entire separate, as you probably are aware, a separate subcommittee report on academic advising support and tutoring as part of this report, and there is no question that without quality academic advising and intervention and support, it's not possible to achieve the results that we want to achieve, particularly for those students who enter needing developmental education coursework. I think it's an even stronger need for them to get the kind of counseling and support and appropriate placement to make sure that we minimize the length of time that is spent in developmental education. There are students, and I thank you for bringing up the subtitle of this task force, which is One Size Does Not Fit All. There are students who will require the traditional semester-long sequence delivery of developmental education. It is our thought, though, that because we can explore different models for delivery, there are for some students for whom it's appropriate to think that we could put a co-requisite or a compression in place where we shorten the length of time that a student spends in a developmental education coursework.
Thank you, Regent Robinson. I also wanted to make a comment on that. One of the topics, particularly towards the end of this task force, was ensuring that we had the nuance in the final report, both as to the different types of students that we're trying to serve with these programs and their different needs, and also the differences between different campuses in the system. And I really want to both, I think, thank Sharon and Neil and John, because they were very diligent in ensuring that everyone on the task force, and many of them entered as skeptics of this type of reform, had the ability to insert that nuance into the full report. And so I think that going forward, that perspective is well represented, and I encourage you to especially look at the preface to the full report, which speaks to that pretty directly. And I think it's my hope that sort of view is represented going forward, so that we're going forward with knowing that this is may not as easy a conversation as we might think at first glance, but one that has many, many layers that we need to think about when we're writing policy. So I think that's well represented.
Regent Teal, Deputy Commissioner Seck, just want to extend a few thank yous for the work on this. I mean, it was less than a year ago that John and I met in my office and said, you know, this is just one of those areas we need to stop talking about and start making some headway on. And I think we're making some headway. This is an incredible effort that's been put forward by the task force and a lot of work that's been done. I also think certainly needs some recognition to Superintendent Juneau for the incredible headway that's been made on your end, moving from 36 or 7% down to 28. I mean, that's moving a mountain in education standards. And I think together we really can whip this problem in Montana. And it's a problem that exists nationally, but it's just one that needs solved. There's too many students that are falling out of the cracks one way or the other because of developmental ed. And, you know, the statistics that we talk about, the odds against them, I think we can change those odds. And this is going a long ways. The work that's happening at K through 12 is absolutely going a long ways. I really feel like we can move a mountain here, and I appreciate everybody's efforts toward this.
Yes.
I guess I would just like to reiterate that, and coming together and working on these big issues like this is really important, particularly between K-12 and higher ed. And so I appreciate being at the table at those conversations, and as these get developed. The one thing I will say is, and I'll be attending more Regents meetings, I think, throughout the next few years, but to push the system a little bit towards consistency. I get that there are nuances. I get that there are separate needs at each campus. But until families and students understand exactly what they need to reach as far as standards, as far as the score, then a placement test, then whatever comes next, and so I like the idea of the communication, because it's communication between our systems, but also out to the people who are actually consumers of your system. It needs to be very clear. And when there are different placement tests, when there are different cutoff scores, it becomes a confusing mess, to be frank. And we really need to clean that up so that people know the expectations and they can start aiming towards those goals.
Great. Are there other comments or questions? Yeah, Regent Krause.
Yes, Regent Teal, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Juneau, for your, Superintendent Juneau, for that good observation. There's a certain argument for predictability that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't necessarily think that adding predictability eliminates the flexibility in the system, and you see all of these ideas up on in the shortened version here. In the long version that's attached, we talk about all the different kinds of students that walk into our university system, and I think that's one of the great things about this, is that we recognize that we're going to take the people that come to us and educate them and not turn them away. And that's that open enrollment that we're all dedicated to here is a big part of this. It's trying to make the open enrollment work. It's not, we're not exclusionary here. We're just providing a lot more tools. But I do appreciate, predictability too, and I think that this will allow it. Making these changes will increase predictability and provide people, students over traditional age, students still in high school, whatever it is, with the tools they need to get into the system and be successful.
Yeah, Regent McLean.
Once again, just a great big heartfelt thank you to you, Regent Teal, Dr. Seck, Sharon, all of your task force members on each of the respective task forces who came together, and of course the superintendent and your team who provided very valuable input for this conversation. This is, I think, a magnificent tool for us in moving forward with this conversation. And so much of the conversation last time was about that communication piece and the articulation to our consumers of what the expectations will be. And I really want to credit the task force with the recommendation of the first and the second semester completion of those courses. And it would seem like one of those things that perhaps would happen naturally, but I think it's one of those things that needs to be set out. I want to credit the team for the executive summary. I think that clearly spells out to a person taking a quick glance at it, what's about to happen, what's about to come. And to all of the folks who sat around the table, I think what you put together here is something that envelops everything from the ACT to the Common Core. And I was really glad to see so much emphasis put on the writing piece in there. And I know we in K-12 are being expected to put our emphasis there, the speaking and the listening standards. And so I just can't say enough about the good work that was done here and the great leadership behind the task force and the results here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chancellor Groseth, did you have comments you wanted to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure exactly what level of action the board is going to take here, but I did want to address one of the items, recommendation number 4. I think that all of the persons teaching these courses will have the same status. It has not been uncommon across the country for the needs for developmental education to be seen and met by areas of the universities and colleges outside of the academic areas. On the Billings campus, the Academic Support Center operates under the aegis of Student Affairs. Those instructors have been hired separately, and we have a long history of that. We've been having the conversations during the last year about the appropriate placement of those instructors within the university, but some of those needs have been recognized and met by other areas of the university. You may recall that in the mid to late 90s on the Bozeman campus, we actually asked faculty from Great Falls College to come to our campus and teach those lower level math courses. And so I want to caution against mandating and immediately switching to for our instructors to necessarily be put over into math departments because this is a case where one size fits all may not work.
Dr. Seck, you want to address that?
Sure. Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Chancellor Groseth. This was a point of discussion at the task force, and a couple of things. One is I don't think the recommendation as it's presented is as prescriptive as in the instructors would be through the math department. I think what we were looking at is that the faculty who teach developmental education, whether they be full-time or part-time, are a part of academic affairs within the respective college or university so that there's integration with the respective faculty who teach the gateway courses, as well as that there's a vertical opportunity for the developmental education faculty if they want to teach gateway courses. So I think we're looking at it from a communication perspective, an integration perspective, and potentially also an accreditation perspective to make sure that it's tied in with academic affairs and ultimately under the chief academic officer.
Thank you.
Dr. Renz?
Thank you, Regent Teal. I just want to share our experiences at the law school over the past 20 years. We had a multi-caste system of what we refer to as stand-up professors, clinical professors, and legal writing professors. We actively attempted to and succeeded in integrating all of those various areas of the law school so that every professor is on a tenure track except for me, but that's okay. And we've integrated those positions in ways that our stand-up professors work in clinics, our clinic professors teach stand-up courses, and the change has been extraordinarily beneficial. That process of integration means that we communicate with each other about what's going on in the courses. We can assess what's going on in the courses because as students come up to their third year and we see them in the clinical program, we can report back to the first-year faculty and say, here's a gap that we see in what's going on. Here's something that seems to be working very well. I think that the recommendation that the developmental faculty be fully integrated into the academic affairs side of every institution is an extraordinarily good recommendation. And as I say, we've seen it work, and we've seen the positive results that we see when you do that sort of integration. Remember, I've seen over the past 2 years the entire university system working towards a fully integrated process, whether it's the four-year campuses and what some of the four-year campuses refer to as the flagship institutions, common course numbering that allows movement back and forth among the campuses, and then further integration of the two-year colleges into the university mission. The more that we can integrate those things, the better off I think we'll be.
Great. Are there other questions and comments? I do also want to thank Superintendent Juneau for coming today and for your input. This is obviously, I think, still going to be a long path to run, but these are, I think, a great starting point. And on the specific policy recommendations, I know that we'll have another chance to have another level of thought about how we go about doing that, and another time to consider it at the board level when those specific recommendations come forward. Thank you so much, Sharon. And I think it's the intent of the committee to move this forward to later on today. You want to do that now? The committee moves the Developmental Education Reform Task Force summary and recommendations to the full board.
Thank you, Regent Teal, and thank you, Sharon, for the conversation. Regents, we now have a motion before us to adopt the Developmental Education Reform Task Force summary and recommendations. Is there any board conversation or questions? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? At this time, we will take a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. Congratulations, good work. We look forward to seeing you back again next May. And to all of your task force members, if you're watching, thank you for your time and contributions. Regent Teal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for the rest of the agenda, we're having presentations that are loosely related, I think, to the two-year plan that we've been following this year for the committee, and gives a kind of a good cap for the year as to a lot of really great work that's been led by Dr. Seck. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Seck to run through these presentations.
Thank you, Regent Teal. I would like to begin by just sharing a couple of things that I think are very significant and really tie into the agenda that's set forward. Two-year education in Montana is on the map. In fact, it's on the national map. Something very significant that's going to happen on July 1 is the president of Flathead Valley Community College, Dr. Jane Karras, will become the chairman of the board of the American Association of Community Colleges. That's the association of 1,200 community colleges across the United States. This is phenomenal. I've been in the community college world a long time, and I have to say, it doesn't get any bigger than that. So congratulations, Dr. Karras. This past spring, I had the opportunity also to witness some tremendous things. On April 30th, I traveled to Flathead Valley Community College and was there for the ribbon cutting of the Rebecca Chaney Broussard Center for Nursing and Health Sciences. There were, I don't know, probably 500 people there. Every person in Kalispell, it seemed like, was there. And what was phenomenal about that is that it was privately funded, and it was funded and planned and built in 20 months. It was incredible. I think another round of applause for President Karras and Flathead Valley. Wednesday of this week, the Bright Beginnings Learning Center here at Great Falls College was another proud moment and something that has been in the long time making. Congratulations, Dean Wolf. And another big one is the legislative funding for the new building for Missoula College. That has been a long time in coming. So as Regent Teal mentioned, the two-year committee work plan has been our guiding force as we've been moving forward. The commissioner asked me to prepare a summary of College Now, the first years of College Now, and what has happened since the Lumina Foundation made that grant available for Montana. And I don't have to spend a lot of time on the strategies of that grant because you know them. You helped develop them as the Board of Regents. But one of the things that's been very significant with this grant is that over the past several years, and I think as the commissioner pointed out earlier, since 2008, when Mary Sheehy Moe was appointed as the first deputy commissioner, a lot of good stuff has happened in two-year education in Montana. And this is a little report card that we'll be presenting to the Lumina Foundation, but if we look at just the first 3 years of the College Now grant, enrollment in the two-year colleges has increased 12%. Transfers from the two-year colleges to the universities has increased 3%. That's not what we want, but a lot of the initiatives, a lot of the efforts have been put into growing and building university transfer, and I fully expect over the next few years that number is going to jump significantly. Completion has jumped 22% at our two-year colleges across the state, and efficiency, and this is the expenditures per completion, this is a good thing. It's decreased 16%. So we're excited about that. We made a compelling case to the Lumina Foundation back in 2008. Why? Because with the exception of the 3 public community colleges back just about 10 years ago, Montana was either last or nearly last in every category related to two-year education opportunities and awareness. Not too long ago, we only had 3 public two-year colleges offering the comprehensive mission. Now we have 9, and we're working on the 10th to add it. Planning has been central. As you know, last March, you approved the comprehensive mission expansion plans for each of the 7 former colleges of technology and two-year programs. And I'm really pleased to share this from MSU Billings. Provost Pagano provided this to me this morning. This is the strategic plan for MSU Billings. And item H in the strategic plan talks about embracing the new two-year mission for City College and moving the initiatives of College Now forward, which I thought was really great. And Regent Teal, in his motion to approve the plans, asked the 7 units to come back to this board 2 times a year and provide an update. That's really important. As I mentioned at the breakfast, a little thing happened, a few moments ago with the gift giving. A few things happened a year ago involving the colleges being rebranded and renamed. At first, a couple of years ago, it didn't seem like it would be a big deal. It was a big deal. It was a long, big deal. When the Board of Regents approved the names of the new colleges in Havre and then finishing in June, it was thought that the rollout would begin this summer. But beginning with Dean Bingham, the rollout began last summer and it concluded this spring. So what we thought we were just going to be starting on this summer, we have finished. I was invited to one of the two-year colleges, former colleges of technology the other day to have a cup of coffee with a faculty member there. In fact, this was a faculty member who had actually ended up in the newspaper a couple of times, who was opposed to the renaming of the colleges. This faculty member shared with me, and he said he wanted to have the opportunity to share with me that he changed his mind. He thought it was a really good thing. In fact, he said that this effort over the last year has gone more to change the vo-tech stigma that has surrounded these colleges than anything over the past 10 years. That was a really neat event. Also, the Board of Regents, as we've mentioned before, yesterday has frozen the tuition of the two-year colleges for now going into 8 years with the upcoming biennium. We've seen massive changes with online dual enrollment. Superintendent, we have a lot of work to do. We spent 4 hours talking about it in this building on Wednesday afternoon, and we are going to make a lot of changes. We've also integrated the College Now initiative into other federal grants such as Gear Up, Big Sky Pathways, and the TRIO ETS grants, and leveraging our abilities to grow K-12 to college pathways. And Tyler Trevor has done a fantastic job with the integrated information system, common course numbering, and integrating Banner into Miles and Dawson. Performance-based funding was one of the early goals of College Now, and with this board meeting, it's looking very positive. Communications and engagement has been a huge aspect of this, and really, Chancellor Blackketter, I think you recognize that by honoring the governor with an honorary associate degree. But most importantly, I think over the past 6-7 years, Montana has gone from operating like a loose confederation of community and two-year technical colleges to looking like it has a real two-year system. Granted, it's a system with a small s, but regardless, it is operating like a system. Thank you.
Any questions or comments on that presentation? If not, we'll move into the Workforce Development Task Force.
Great. And I would like to ask Jerry Pullman to come forward, and we'll have a conversation about this. President Cruzado and I have had the pleasure of co-chairing the Workforce Development Task Force since last year, and we had a full task force meeting March 25th in the Commissioner's office, and we were very pleased to welcome Pam Busey, Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry, and Meg O'Leary, Director of the Montana Department of Commerce, and President Engstrom was with us as well. We discussed a number of things that have been going on that were very positive, including a recent event at City College which involved a workforce development summit, which Dean Marcia Riley coordinated. And this was a pretty neat event. They brought in Dr. Tony Zeiss, president of Central Piedmont Community College in North Carolina. They brought in representatives from the EDA, the Chamber of Commerce, Business and Industry, and they rolled up their sleeves and started to work on what is a vision statement and strategies to really help further engage City College at MSU Billings' involvement and responsiveness with workforce training. We also talked about the continuing need for workforce training and what we can do as two-year colleges around the state to really ramp up for that. President Cruzado asked each of the campuses to think about one thing that they could do, one project that they could do, and if they had funding, what would it be? And that was a great charge, and it's a great opportunity to have some really good ideas up our sleeves if some funding opportunities do develop. One of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about in the Workforce Development Task Force meeting was how can we reach out and get external resources to really move this agenda forward. One of those resources that we are spending a lot of time on is the U.S. Department of Labor TAACCT grant. The U.S. Department of Labor is allocating about $500 million for round 3. We have tried 2 times to secure a statewide consortium proposal, and we failed both times. So in visiting with the commissioner earlier this year, we said, what can we do to really increase our chances of doing this? And in doing so, he freed up some funds to hire a consultant who has experience in Montana to work with us. At the same time, Great Falls College stepped up to be the lead institution for this grant, and the only institution to have secured a TAC grant in the last 3 years, Flathead Valley Community College, stepped up and said, we're going to do everything we can to make this successful. So Jerry Pullman is here today to talk about where we are with this project. We have 13 colleges, including 2 tribal colleges, who have been working very hard to be involved. They've conducted focus groups. They've had businesses complete surveys. And we have, I think, a pretty good plan pulled together around 2 areas of focus: energy and advanced manufacturing. And unfortunately, Jerry encountered a similar ordeal to me. It seems to be related to this grant, shoulder surgery. So I'm out of the sling, Jerry's in the sling, but she can type. So Jerry is an absolutely phenomenal force, and we appreciate her work, and she's going to provide you with a brief overview.
Right. So this is the Excel. EJ, do you have the Excel? Oh, somebody over there, sorry.
The graph I sent you.
The 2 sectors, and this is the concept for both of these that you see came from Matt Springer at Flathead Valley Community College. And I'm really proud to say that the beautiful formatting was done by one of our students who, oddly enough, is not a design student, but instead is seeking 2 degrees. One is an Associate of Arts and another in accounting. But she does know her way around Excel, obviously. But the whole idea, the Department of Labor and the Department of Education, who are behind these TACT grants, is that they want credentials that people can come in, they call them stacked or latticed. They want credentials that people can get that add to or go into another credential. So this concept is an attempt to do that. You start with the workers who aren't even ready to work, see if you can get them maybe the National Career Readiness Certificate, bump them into the next level, which may be just some very introductory type. In this advanced manufacturing, maybe just a very rudimentary welding skills, some very rudimentary electronic skills, and then they keep building on that. Or they stop out and go to work. That's the DOL's dream, their vision for, and then it has to lead to occupations that are identified by industry. Industry has to be on board. They have to say, yes, we need these people, yes, we value this credential, and we're going to hire them. So every partner in this endeavor, all colleges have to find an industry saying, these are the people we need. So if we could just go to the energy one, and a similar thing here. Energy, because advanced manufacturing takes in the welding that we've all heard such a need for, some pipe fitting, machining, those sorts of jobs. The energy is obviously a response to what's going on in the Bakken, as well as some of the stuff in the Canadian oil sands. That's all energy related, whether you call it advanced manufacturing or energy. Something to do with some of that oil and gas production. Some of those jobs are very rudimentary, roustabouts, something like that. But the industry is telling us if you could just give them 3 to 5 days of this is what a wellhead looks like, or this is how to keep yourself safe, they're looking for that. But we also want those people to know that, okay, maybe I get my CDL, I'm a commercial driver. If I can add Flathead's entrepreneurship endorsement, maybe I can buy a truck and run my own truck out in the oil fields. So there's not just, I got my CDL and that's where I'm going to spend the rest of my life. What we're hoping to do is give people pathways where they can continue to move up the ladder. So the application's due in a month. There's a lot of work to do, so everybody is working really hard on it. And I will be happy to defer any questions you might have to Dr. Seck.
Thanks, Jerry.
I want to take some time to, I know that from the emails and the timestamps on the emails I've been getting from Dr. Seck that people have been working very, very hard on this grant. It's a really short timeline for such a complex grant. So thank you, Dean Wolf, for taking the lead, and thanks to everyone who's on such short notice put in so much time to try and see if we can make this opportunity happen. Are there questions from board members?
And Chairman Teal, I'd also just like to call out a shout out to Brad Eldridge and Matthew Springer at Flathead, who've working with Jerry and Mel Lehman. They've been an unstoppable team.
Well, one other comment before we move on. I think one important aspect that's happened with the Workforce Development Task Force is bringing on Commissioner Pam Busey and Director Meg O'Leary. Having those departments represented, I think, is going to be really important. There's a lot of room where we can improve how we do workforce development by seeing how we can coordinate more effectively. So with that, thank you so much. And I know we're a little behind, so we'll keep going, but if we can.
Dr. Garrick, if you could come forward. Dr. Garrick, this was a brainchild of Dr. Garrick, and it's something that I think is going to spread to an annual event, and it's a first annual Student Research Day for Montana's two-year colleges. So, Dean Garrick.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm John Garrick, Dean of Highlands College. I'm here to tell you about the first annual Student Research Day for two-year colleges, celebrating research, creative, and scholarly activities in all disciplines. You know, after coming to two-year education, most of my background's been in four-year education. I continued my research agenda working with students because it's fun. Can we go to the next slide, Amy? So the thought came to me, hey, why not do a research day just like I used to do when I was in four-year education? And so it's would bring a higher profile to two-year education, part of college now, and it was really important to me to include all disciplines. Next slide. All of us in two-year education are seeking better ways to help students succeed and complete. The educational literature is absolutely clear. There's a positive impact on students, retention, completion, and for me, what's really important is satisfaction, that they feel good about what they're doing. Next slide, please. The literature is also clear that when faculty do research with students, that there is positive impact on faculty in their satisfaction, professional development. Research is not typically part of two-year education, but I consider it as part of service to the institution, service to the system generally. So next slide, please. So we did it. We did a research day. We put it together, 32 projects, 60 students. Each of you should have a copy of the abstract book in front of you. Tim Urbaniak from City College was our luncheon keynote speaker. Next slide, please, Amy. We grouped the students by discipline so that students around the state could see each other and talk to each other. Next slide. You know, we use the term research, creative, and scholarly activities. I know that's a long phrase and not to just say research, but I do it on purpose to literally and figuratively include all disciplines. So what happens next? We move on to the second annual Student Research Day, and it moves on to City College. So, you know, members of the board, as a result of your actions, support of the Commissioner's Office, two-year education really is front and center in Montana. Student Research Day is part of that. Our students do significant work with accomplished faculty. So we are Montana's two-year colleges. We stand in our rightful place, shoulder to shoulder with our equals in the four-year institutions, and we're here to stay. Any questions?
Regent McLean.
Very exciting opportunity for students. A question I have is, were there any dual enrollment high school students invited or able to participate? Is that an opportunity in the future?
The more the better, in my opinion.
You'll see some
and I
from
would love
Anaconda
them
next
to
year, then.
participate. Absolutely.
Super.
The key is, we want to role model lifelong learning. And so this is student-driven research, but faculty are a critical piece of that to help them along,
And I would ask then in that, so that it's not just dual enrollment students from Anaconda, that there be outreach to those teachers in our high schools who are teaching the dual enrollment across the state, who enroll in the two-year institutions to earn those credits.
I
That
can
would be an
guarantee you
exciting
that will
opportunity.
happen in the
Thank you.
five-county
Very well
region
done.
around Butte.
Very well done.
All right. Thank you very much.
Regent Tuss?
Dean Garrett? That's okay. Thank you. Is this a national trend? I haven't heard much
It is.
about two-year research. Is it unique to Montana? What's going on?
There is a
trend line on
national
this?
organization that was just formed or recently formed by the National Science Foundation called the Community College Undergraduate Research Initiative, also known as CURRY. I suspect that after a couple of years, it will merge with the Council for Undergraduate Research, the National Science Foundation, through our own Bev Hartline, who we heard about yesterday. She put me in contact with them, and they sent me to DC to a Curry conference, and got to see what schools all over the nation are doing in two-year research. Again, the goal here not only is the research, but the goal is to create the relationship between the faculty member and the student. That's where the joy happens for the faculty, and the students are motivated up to their eyeballs. It's very exciting.
And
For those of us that are in education that have done research with students, it's just a thrill.
And Madam Chair, Regent Tuss, I'll just give you an example. At City College at MSU Billings, Professor Tim Urbaniak and his students through the Drafting and Design Department cataloged the pictograph caves. They not only digitally recorded the pictographs, which are thousands of years old, but they used 3D modeling, so they have everything captured. One of those pictographs was lost a month ago due to a cave-in, and it's lost forever. But it's not lost forever because of Mr. Urbaniak and his students.
Thank you.
President Engstrom?
Regent Teal, I had the pleasure for many years of being involved in the Council on Undergraduate Research, a national organization that started 25 plus years ago now. And just give you a little story about the evolution of that organization as it leads to what we're talking about here. Council on Undergraduate Research started as a group of chemists from private liberal arts colleges, and they felt that they were the bastion of undergraduate research. Within about 2 years, it expanded to include chemists from public institutions, and then physicists from different kinds of institutions, and on, and then they started saying, we need the social sciences and the humanities in here. And so it kept growing and growing, discipline by discipline, type of school by type of school. And so two-year education is a logical next step for the Council on Undergraduate Research. And John, I'm very happy to hear that you're involved in that, keeping an eye on that. And if there's anything we can do to help move the Council on Undergraduate Research to include a good solid unit of two-year research, that would be great. What we have seen over those 25 years is that the level of sophistication of the research done keeps going up and up. And so research that was sort of the purview only of graduate students a few years ago is now regularly done by undergraduates. And the research that was done by undergraduates is now being done by two-year students and even high school students. And so the whole movement is just pushing us to do more and more cutting-edge, state-of-the-art research. So, John, I'm really delighted to see this activity, a great step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, everyone.
Of course, that all starts with chemists. Regent Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to also chime in as well, Dr. Garrick, because looking at this format that you put together and the program, I think it's so critical because of even what we heard this morning in visiting with the business community here at Great Falls, and how important two-year colleges are, and that they meet the needs of the community. And part of that need is certainly addressing those that need the trade skills to, begin their professional career. The other part of 2 years, though, is exactly what we see here, is you have the whole range of it. You include the trades, but you also include the arts. You include, the social sciences. You include the humanities, which are just as critical if we're going to continue to meet the needs in Montana for the students that are looking for something like that. So I don't think, we know that as a board, two-year colleges are important. We've shown that. But I think what's also important is having the breadth in the two-year colleges that's important, because it may be the first entry for a student in that community, and to give them an idea of what they could be doing later on in life, I think is also part of our job. So this is really wonderful. Thank you very much.
No, absolutely. I think that, and people who have known sort of my pet projects at MSU, I think that how we should be doing education more and more is teaching by doing, finding ways to give students real responsibility, because not only is that a great way to learn, but it instills in students a sense of how much education really matters. They see the effect that they can have firsthand. And I think this is a great way to, incorporate the unique experience that research provides in an area where it hasn't been incorporated before. So thanks so much for bringing this forward, presenting it, and best of luck continuing it, and let us know how we can help. And with that, if there aren't any other comments, we'll move on to the next item.
Yes, and I'd like to ask Jan Lombardi to come forward. We hired Jan about a year ago as she transitioned out of the governor's office, where she had served for 8 years, to head up our Gear Up grant, and she's done an absolutely phenomenal job and has been working very closely with OPI on the implementation of the statewide ACT, and she's here to talk about that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Seck and members of the board. It is kind of fun to be back after all these years. And if I can, Amy? Yeah, it's loading. Is it loading? Sorry. As mentioned, I'm the director of Montana Gear Up, and I thought I'd give a little bit of background on Gear Up so that you know. It's a federal college access program. It stands for Gaining Early Awareness for Undergraduate Programs. Using your relay analogy today, I view Gear Up actually as part of a relay race where students are the batons. And we have the benefit of being in K-12 and higher ed and overlapping through that junction and making sure that we're having those students transition in that relay race from one area of public education to the other. And I will say it's not easy, as you all are talking about here today. The Commissioner's Office received the Gear Up grant in 2011. It is for $28 million, and it requires a dollar-for-dollar match. So at the end of 7 years, we're going to have a $56 million investment in our students. I'll reiterate, dollar-for-dollar match. I'm looking for partners. OPI is a significant partner of ours. We have a two-prong approach, and actually one of them, we target 18 school districts. And Amy, if I can have you bring up that map, and then we'll come back to the infographics. We target 18 school districts in Montana, and those districts were chosen based on specific criteria that they had to be in economically challenged areas of the state, and then in particular looking at the school districts that also needed to have at minimum 50% free and reduced lunch, as well as different academic challenges, I'll just say, for the students. And of our 18 school districts, 13 are located on or near reservations. So I can have you go back. The infographic on the wall is, I don't know how familiar you are a little bit, but infographics are a new way to essentially express a combination of data and text. And I've heard a lot of discussion about data here today, so I was trying to get a bit of both of those up there. Our services begin in 7th grade, and we now have the luxury this year of following our students into the first year of college. In a nutshell, and it's up there what our 3 goals are, but they're pretty specific and simple in context, that we're really trying to get kids to graduate from high school and then be ready to go on to college and enroll in your doors. I refer to the intensive services that we do in Montana as really barrier busting. And we try to take particular attention to what are those barriers for either students, parents, or educators in the school district to help them be academically successful and prepared. All our schools, by the way, are required to be Graduation Matters Montana schools, and you'll see there's a lot of partnership with OPI. And I did have the luxury of attending the Browning GMM launch with Denise, and it really is exciting to see these collaboratives in the school. Specifically to gear up also, we have an outside evaluator. We've contracted with Pacific Research Associates in Portland who are helping us really take a look at some very specific metrics that deal with both K-12 and transitions into higher ed, and help us look at those performance indicators on our school level as well as at the state level. And I do think that that defined body of research is maybe something that you could look at in terms of identifying what are some of those best practices or things that we're seeing in our schools as well. If I can highlight a little bit, Amy, if you can take the infographic down a bit. Thank you. Last year, we served 3,660 students. A little over 3/4, or 77% of our students are American Indian, and 90% of them are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Our students receive intensive academic tutoring, and last year, nearly 1,500 students received 10 hours of tutoring services specifically in the school for them. And I just want to emphasize these are all services that are value added and they're above and beyond what a traditional, I guess is the best way to put it, a traditional K-12 middle school or high school could do. The students also, one of the key things that we try to do is get them out of the school and get them on campuses, which I think would be of particular interest to you. And that I know that I have heard when I've been out there visiting students about what it is, our Gear Up students that are now on the campuses around the state. What was something that changed for you? Why are you here? And oftentimes it's that experience that either through a visit on your campus or a summer camp is a defining moment for them, and oftentimes it's in middle school. So last year we had 1,641 students who made a total of 132 campus visits. I will say that, a campus visit for a 7th grader needs to look very different than a junior or a senior. I'd be happy to help work with you all if you'd like some tips or techniques, because the feedback varies. And if you'd like to know some specific information from us about our students' footprint on your campus, I'd be happy to share that with you. This summer, we're looking at having around 900 students that are going to have experiences from summer camps, which is another really important thing that for many of you, you probably do know, but summer is a time of learning loss. So we really work really hard with our schools to make sure that there are summer opportunities either at the local school level where the students can do credit recovery or have enrichment, or else we've been working with the various campuses to do camps around the state and then actually have week-long opportunities for students to actually come, stay overnight, or even do day camps. There's a couple, if you just want to pass them around, please, Susan. I am excited that this year we are going to have a camp also up at MSU Northern for the first time. That's really going to be an introduction for students into transportation, energy, and manufacturing, which really speaks to the two-year sector. I encourage you all to really give some thought to summer programming, and I'll be in touch about more opportunities going forward with your campuses. Another thing that's a little bit unique for Gear Up, that our students also really receive a lot of financial aid presentations beginning in 7th grade. And in addition, in 7th grade, all our students receive a 21st Century Scholar certificate at the conclusion at the end of the year, which this year I added Superintendent Juneau's signature in addition to Commissioner Christian. And the certificate really recognizes the students' success at that point when they're entering into 8th grade, and then gives them a lot of information about that they will be able to afford to pay for college. And specifically, not only about financial aid, but looking forward to studying hard and being ready for dual enrollment classes and things. So we really are looking backwards. About 1,600 students received an average of 10 hours of counseling or advising on academic and career planning within that 7 through 12 setting, as well as parents also received on average 3 hours of actual time spent on really discussing college and career planning. One other thing that we're launching next year on the affordability aspect will be a matched education savings account for students. And we've partnered with the Montana credit unions, as well as Student Assistance Foundation has provided some resource money. And we're going to be working with 63 students to save money over time, and it has a strong financial literacy component in it. If the students save up to $500, that will match it 5 to 1 for them to have money in the bank to go to college. And the research is really profound. For students who even save just a little bit of money, they're up to 7 times more likely to go on to college. So we've been working with University of Kansas also, who came out here and researched with some of our schools how to actually do children's savings accounts in low-income areas. And we are one of very few states that are entering into that. This past year, we also piloted something called College Application Week, and we're looking forward to definitely growing that next year. I just spent a day last week with the Lumina Foundation and other states that have done College Application Week. I think it's a really great transition after ACT. What it is students during the school day are applying to college. So it's incorporated into the K-12 setting, and other states have seen enormous jumps in their enrollment. And one other thing we piloted this past year and look forward to doing more next year is VITA for volunteers, and partnered with the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Network to actually, we did a VITA for Education Day and had all the volunteers in terms of helping low-income families who are eligible for free tax assistance if they make less than $50,000, to actually, when they're coming in and getting their taxes done, to have a discussion about education. Are you going to school now? Are you thinking about it? Do you know about tax credits? Do you know about FAFSA? And the importance of that being a factor for being able to pay for college, as well as have you thought about savings? So there's on the VITA, we now have on the state Montana Free File a VITA for Education resource. Our class last year, if I'd like you just to meet the class of 2012, that class was 412 students. We had, of that population, we gave them roughly a little over $1 million in financial aid. Beginning in their junior year, students are eligible to apply for a grant of $1,500, which is based on their GPA and their commitment, their experience thus far, and their commitment to stay on the Montana University prep course requirements. And then those students are then eligible in their senior year to apply for what we refer to as a pathway scholarship, which, if awarded, gives them up to the same amount of Pell eligibility. And this year was $22,500, and we just awarded 50 seniors those scholarships. They too, it's a combination of, they need to be Pell eligible, but they also have a lot of merit requirements in terms of GPA, course taking, and they also have to demonstrate a community service project and commitment to leadership. Our students, 45% of them completed the FAFSA, the same graduating class. 64% graduated, or 74% graduated from high school, which is actually less than the state high school graduation rate, and then 64% went on to college. Of those that went on to college, can't see that very well. I need to make it a little bit bigger. Of that, 50% of our students go to tribal colleges, which makes sense. We're located on or near the reservation, but that really is a place where many of our students go. The top 5 colleges where the Gear Up students attend: Blackfeet Community College, Little Bighorn, University of Missoula, MSU Bozeman, and Salish Kootenai College. As mentioned, the tribal colleges are incredibly important, and I've been working with the Department of Education and the White House Initiative on American Indian Education to really find ways too that we can shore up those relationships and the relevancy of tribal colleges in our state, both for an associate's as well as transition into the university system. Moving forward into one other big thing that Gear Up did this year, and really in partnership with OPI, is moving our services statewide so that this year all public school, high school juniors were eligible to take the ACT. So approximately 10,500 students took the ACT plus writing exam this April. They are now beginning to receive their results in the mail. I believe that the conversation already this morning has addressed many of the opportunities that we have with this ACT exam and many of the challenges too, because now we have a number of students in our state that have a key piece of information, and for many of them, they will not know exactly what that means. So it's incumbent upon all of us to, you know, as we're continuing to do this, to work together about what that piece will mean. I do believe that were it not for the extraordinary leadership also from Superintendent Juneau to want to take this on to turn 172 high schools into testing centers by ACT standards, we would not be here today now with our students having been able to take this test, which 4 out of 10 have not previously. And they would not have had the money. They would have not had the money to go to a testing center. And that it really is a fabulous demonstration of pushing equity in our state. So with that,
Thank
that's
you,
a
Jan.
big
Thanks.
overview.
Thanks, Regent Teal. Jan, great to see you. Thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
work, and
Sure, thank
miss working with you at this table. Just point out one thing, you mentioned the scholarships that you just granted,
Uh-huh.
and you know, one thing we've been talking about is that we talk about financial aid, and I think it's wonderful that you're identifying that need and merit are not mutually exclusive. You can incorporate the both as we apply aid and remind ourselves that we can follow now best practices. So, Jan, thanks so much.
Great, thank you.
Regent Robinson.
Thank you. I have a question, and you know, this is fantastic work that's being done. Thank you for the report today. I was wondering, as far as, and I think you may have covered part of this in your presentation, but the qualifications, or how does a student within one of those districts get involved in Gear Up? What's the requirement of the student, I guess?
That's a good question, Regent Robertson. And I must say we're really fortunate that the way that the grant was constructed, that all students are eligible. It's not, the intention is really to do universal services in our Gear Up schools. And for some of our new schools that it's cohort driven, it may be dependent upon the grade level you're in, that we're beginning in 7th grade and we're moving up. For some of our prior Gear Up schools, then it's 7 through 12. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Regent McLean.
Just a quick thank you for the great work that you've done with the Gear Up schools and with the administration of the program, Jan. And thank you for partnering with the Office of Public Instruction in administering the ACT. We know that it is Gear Up that supplies the funds, and I think that there's a great deal of collaboration in making sure that there's effective administration across the state. So thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent Juneau.
I guess I would just like to also give thanks for Jan and the work that we do together. I think Gear Up and OPI actually have a very strong partnership, and it's one of the things that I always point to as far as our Commissioner of Higher Ed and the OPI work that we do in conjunction to make sure students are prepared for college and those transitions. And of course, the big thing this year was the ACT for every junior. I just want to remind everybody that the scores will dip because more students are taking the ACT. We were always able to brag in the state that our seniors taking the ACT scored above the national average, and therefore were college ready, but only 60% of the students who were graduating from high school were actually taking the test. And so just be aware of that. We could use your help when those statewide scores roll out as far as communication efforts. And also just to let you know that as a result of all the juniors taking the ACT, my office just distributed 993 certificates to students across the state who scored a 27 or higher on the ACT. Wow. And so there's a lot to be commended for this partnership and making sure that things work. And I think that the state, as well as students and family, will benefit across Montana. So thanks.
Thank you, Jan. With that, moving on to the next item, which is, I think, a pretty exciting item. I'll let Dr. Seck introduce it.
I'd like to ask Interim President Baker and Interim President Watson. Dr. Baker is from Dawson Community College, and Ms. Watson is from Miles Community College. They're both serving as interim presidents. And one thing that's really neat is on April 30th, both boards of trustees got together halfway in Terry for what may be the first joint board meeting in at least 30 to 50 years. So they're here to tell you the story.
Thank you, Chair Thiel, members of the board. My name is Lisa Watson, and I am here today representing Miles Community College. And as Deputy Commissioner Seck said, I will be taking over June 1st as the interim president for Miles Community College, an opportunity that I'm very excited about. Jane Baker, President Baker, and I are here today to speak with you about the recently held joint DCC-MCC meeting. While reviewing the information attachment that you may have noticed that the meeting was historical in nature, as John mentioned. In the past, I understood that the boards had occasion to gather socially in nature, but April 30th was the first time that they had actually ever gotten together to discuss the collaboration of resources. We are in a time of change. Decreasing enrollment, the effects of the booming oil industry, changes in delivery and delivery modalities. These items are all affecting the units of the university system. Specifically, though, Eastern Montana has seen the effects of these changes to a larger extent. So on the heels of the legislative session, and with the support of both President Hickswaw and President Baker, the trustees of both boards met to brainstorm a list of potential ideas for resource sharing. The meeting was open and informative, and the collaborative spirit resulted in an abundance of ideas, the top 5 of which will be taken back to the respective colleges for further research and possible implementation.
Okay. I think, were they going to be showing the slides, John?
We're trying to get them to load.
Oh, okay. All right. One example that Lisa and I have already started discussing is the possibility of shared training this summer for our new board members. We both have new board members. And also shared retreats when we bring in a consultant to work with our boards and to work with both boards together. Recently, we formed a consortium with Miles, Dawson, and Fort Peck to submit a Perkins grant. As you know, collaboration is a growing movement, but it's not new to either campus. Many academic collaborative agreements are currently in place for both campuses. And the idea of expanding the collaboration effort between the two campuses was originally met with some apprehension. As a result of the joint meeting, Dawson trustee Jim Stokes was quoted as saying, quote, "We are Montanans. We like our individuality and independence, but this is the future, and it's not scary. Businesses do it, and we need to do it too," end of quote. Miles and Dawson have faculty and staff who are committed to serving their communities and its students. And where collaboration is beneficial to both campuses, it should be discussed. As you know, Miles and Dawson have also received workforce development funding. This funding is critical to the development of good workforce training. We will be working together to maximize our dollars. Finally, both campuses are in the process of hiring new presidents to lead the charge. In the meantime, as we select our new presidents, we will use this collaborative effort to improve our service to students, gain efficiencies, and ensure the continued existence of campuses in eastern Montana. And we'll welcome any questions.
Are there any questions from members of the board? Regent McLean.
I just want to thank you and thank Dr. Seck, and I want to thank you both as leaders for bringing the trustees from both of the campuses together, I think, to have what is a very important and forward-thinking conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Seck. Thank you both. And with that, we're to our last item.
The last item, and this is like dessert. I'd like to ask John Goodwin and Dustin Spivey to come forward, and Dean Wolf, and I'll explain what we're going to do. 2 years ago, Montana's two-year colleges joined Phi Theta Kappa, which is a national honor organization whose focus is to recognize and encourage scholarship among two-year students. And to achieve this purpose, the organization provides opportunities for the development and service of these students. Phi Theta Kappa and their community college presidents around the country recommend students to participate in the all-state community college academic team ceremonies. And we're very fortunate to have several students in Montana who participated. In fact, Tanner Morrison, who is from Flathead Valley Community College, was the New Century Scholar and the All-State Academic Team winner. He was featured at the American Association of Community Colleges meeting, and his name and picture was in USA Today nationally. From Miles Community College, we had Abby Coakley, who is from Pennsylvania and earned a degree in communications from Miles Community College. But today, from Great Falls College, we have John Goodwin and Dustin Spivey. John and Dustin represent the best of the best here at Great Falls College, and they also represent students who have decided to choose this college as the best direction for themselves as they move forward towards a four-year degree. And that's one of the things that's really exciting, is both of these individuals are moving forward for a four-year degree. So we have their official Phi Theta Kappa certificates and the honor medals. So do we have both here?
Evidently only Dustin's here.
Okay, Dustin is here. So, Commissioner, would you put this around Dustin's neck? All right. So, Dustin? This is why we're here, and we do the work we do every day.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that's a perfect cap to, I think, what's been a really good year on the two-year committee and for two-year ed in Montana. As you can see, we've covered a lot of ground, and there's more work to do, but I really want to thank Dr. Seck for putting in a lot of extra hours to make all of this happen. He's been really a good friend, a good mentor for me, and a great leader for a two-year education in Montana, and we're the beneficiaries. So,
And Regent Teal, I just have to say, none of this would be happening without the deans, the CEOs, the faculty, and the staff at the two-year colleges.
So with that, should I do public comment?
Yes.
Yes. So is there any public comment on the two-year agenda for today? Public comment?
Please.
Hello. I just wanted to speak on what just happened. I may not be able to speak for the rest of the awardees, but I know myself, I may have worked hard academically and leadership-wise, but I would not be nearly as far as I was, or as far as I am, if it were not for the faculty and staff that we have here at our school, and if it weren't for the work that you folks do up here every day. If you got a chance to read my little bio that was up there a moment ago, I actually dropped out and flunked out of college my first time around. And I moved up to Montana because my father told me that college was very affordable up here. College being affordable up here is because of you folks here doing such things like tuition freezes, in which I can get an out-of-state tuition for my first year here more affordable than I could in-state tuition in Arizona. Not only was it affordable, but every member I interacted with was more interested in my personal growth than any person I ever dealt with in school in Arizona. And I want to thank every person in this room who's been a part of making me grow as a student and a learner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? If not, Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Regent Teal. Excellent committee conversation. What we will do is we will hear from Superintendent Juneau, and then we will take a break and resume the rest of our meeting agenda. So at this time, I will turn the mic over to you, Madam Superintendent.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I only have 40 minutes worth of stuff, so just kidding. I'll be brief. I just want to thank the Regents and for the work that they do on behalf of the students of Montana in particular. And as you know, we've been working a lot over the past few years on Graduation Matters Montana. And I think that really is a K-20 initiative. That's how I think about it, you know, with our partnerships with Gear Up, making sure students have access to the ACT and the opportunity to take the ACT, working on all these transition points with the Commissioner's Office on developmental education, on dual enrollment, all those things that are very important to high school students in particular and the families across Montana to make college more affordable. We do want to hear transformational stories like we just heard and that Regent Teal talked about, MSU providing him and those experiences that can happen when students step into college. And so to make that transition as easy as possible, I think really is sort of our charge over the next few years as we work together on these issues. So I just want to let you know, this recently as you know, we have a $450,000 grant from the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation to help us with Graduation Matters Montana community efforts across the state. And really is, these communities come together, they develop their local plans, they implement these plans, and it's seeing great results. You know, our dropout rates are down, our graduation rates are up, we have access to the ACT, we're working on all these issues. But we now have 33 communities that are Graduation Matters communities, and those communities represent 70% of students across this state. And so I think that's a real significant movement towards making sure people have, you know, they're aiming high and they have big dreams, and that we're finding ways to support their efforts in whatever it is that they want to do. We also this year had a $50,000 grant from the Student Assistant Foundation, so thank you, Student Assistant Foundation. But that helped us fund 10 schools, 10 Graduation Matters communities with $5,000 each. And that really was around trying to increase this college awareness for those students in the school. And I believe Anaconda was a recipient of one of those. But what these grants allowed schools to do was do FAFSA outreach, to do some, I think Anaconda actually did dual enrollment and paid for dual enrollment courses for some of their low-income students. Some schools pulled together student and family focus groups about college-going attitudes. And so really talking about what it takes to get to college, those personal skills and the academic requirements that are necessary. And although on a small scale, you know, we had 10 schools that were involved in this, overall, the state saw a decrease of FAFSA completion of 3%. And in these 10 schools, they actually saw an increase of 5% of the FAFSA completion. And so it is really that focus that we as K-12 can bring to the effort about college readiness, college awareness, and making sure that we're talking about that. So I think all this work that we do together as partners is going to pay off in the future for both systems. Just the discussion about what college ready is. Again, I just want to give kudos about the developmental education work that's gone on. And again, I will be urging for consistency for the consumers out there around what placement, admission, and all those kinds of cutoff scores are going to be. And as you all know too, the Board of Public Education recently adopted, or last year adopted, the Common Core Standards in English Language Arts and Mathematics. And I think that's going to play a huge role in making sure students are graduating from high school and graduating and being college and career ready. And the assessment that's going to follow is called a consortium called Smarter Balanced. There are about 30 governing states, of which we are one. It's all moving to online. And I know there will be discussions around developmental education and transition into college around Smarter Balanced. Higher Ed has been a partner at the table in those discussions about what that means in the future for transitioning into college, those admission points and those placement points. I think so that as that moves forward, the regents might want to think about getting a presentation about the Smarter Balanced assessment before it rolls out and becomes very important to both our systems. Dual enrollment, as Dr. Seck said, there was a meeting, I believe, yesterday with the two-year colleges and at least a discussion around dual enrollment. It is going to be one of my big focus efforts over the next couple years, trying to get that system aligned again for consumers of your system so that there's some sort of consistency or at least predictability among the system for high school students to take dual enrollment and or concurrent enrollment courses so that they can get that head start on college. We all know the research shows that when students are taking those early college courses that they are more likely to go to college, they're more likely to finish college, and so I think that really is a co-initiative that we can really push out across the state and make it more available to people, particularly in our rural communities that may not have access to a lot of the things that are going on in our larger cities. And so I know that out of that dual enrollment discussion, there was discussion about a work group coming together. So I'm excited for that. I look forward to working with that work group to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to make sure those dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment opportunities are available to all students in this state. And then I just also know that the Big Sky Pathways has been a big component of that, and there's discussion about tying career and technical education to the dual enrollment courses, and I think that's a really important step as well. I have a student advisory board, and every time we come together, we talk about school climate, graduation rates, what's going on the ground in schools. There's nobody better to speak to than the students who are actually attending our schools about what's happening and, you know, helping to develop policy about what they see going on. And one of the things that they talk about are the real world relevant experiences of career and technical education that they receive. And so I know it helps keep them in school. We know when students are taking 3 or more career technical education courses in high school, they're called concentrators at that point, 96% of them graduate. And so that will also be a big focus around graduation matters, making sure that schools are offering as much as possible. And in fact, in the legislature, House Bill 86 passed that appropriated $1 million to help the career technical education student organizations, FFA, DECA, BPA, Skills USA, get more students involved in those organizations. And I think that will be really helpful as they start beefing those organizations up. And the students that come out of those organizations are really, they become the leaders, and they become really involved in their community, providing service, but also have huge goals of going to college and becoming leaders in this state and the country. And so that's very exciting as well. And, you know, there's also a lot of other partnerships. Tyler Trevor I think was on a data thing that a grant we had together around the electronic transcripts. And so I think, the Board of Public Education just adopted the elements of the official high school transcripts. So that will lay the foundation for the electronic transcripts to move forward. And that's, you know, I think another exciting thing and ease of transition for students and families in the state into higher education. Given all that, the Board of Education, I know Chairman McLean talked about, that's going to be, the governor's calling a meeting of the Board of Education in July, where the Board of Public Education and the Board of Regents will come together to have these discussions. And I think it's important for that sort of group. The Board of Education is very important, but what comes out of that discussion, particularly around the subcommittees that might get developed, the conversations that need to continue around these efforts, the idea that we all need to be communicating. You need to know what we're up to. We need to know what you guys are doing so that we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of the citizens of Montana and not going down separate paths that may or may not be necessary. And so I look forward to continuing the work with the Board of Regents, Madam Chair, and be sitting at this table as often as I can to have these conversations. But we have a lot of work to do, and we'll continue doing that work hand in hand. And I think when we do that, it really does help our state with economic development through the two-year colleges that you just heard about, through the humanities, the arts, and everything else that needs to happen in this state. I am so proud to be the Superintendent of Public Instruction and oversee the K-12 education system in this state. I think we do a fantastic job, and I know all of you do a great job at leading the higher education system, and I just want to make sure that we're moving together down that road, and we can only do that by communicating. And so thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me a nameplate. I'm really happy to see that. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited about our future work together.
Thank you. We are excited about the work together as well. And you have done a remarkable job of moving your agenda forward in what is in the best interest of all of the students across Montana. And the impact, I think, is visible on school campuses every single day. So we thank you, and we look forward to continued growing partnerships with you and those in your office and with the Board of Public Education. Thank you. Are there questions or comments for the superintendent? Okay, thank you, Madam Superintendent. We will now take a break until 11:30. Before we get into the Staff and Compensation Committee, I would like to turn the mic over to President Engstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Yesterday morning, I had the opportunity to introduce to you 2 new cabinet members at the University of Montana. There was a third position in play, but I wasn't quite ready yesterday morning to make that introduction. I had a few T's and I's to dot and cross and so on the last one. But I would like to announce to you that the search for the provost at the University of Montana has come to a conclusion, and I'm happy to introduce to you the new permanent provost of the University of Montana, Perry Brown.
Congratulations, Provost Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are welcome. Thank you. This morning, I would like to spend some time on an update from Kevin on some compensation issues for the weeks ahead, which will correspond with our collective bargaining efforts and our timetable this spring and this summer. I would ask Associate Commissioner Kevin McCray to give us an overview of some of the compensation issues, and then he can indicate to us as a board the type of guidance the commissioner's staff is looking for as we proceed with collective bargaining and pay decisions that the board will be looking at in this September. Mr. McCray, would you please present to us the background and an idea of the guidance that you may need from us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would like to talk a little bit about the timetable for the summer, with full respect for the timetable today, because I know we got to be out of our rooms before the rates double on us tonight. So moving forward, you heard long ago, in fact, I think it was somewhere between roll call and the ARSA committee meeting yesterday, that the legislature appropriated money in House Bill 13 to the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education for compensation adjustments for university system personnel. It is the board's authority to prescribe pay adjustments, compensation adjustments, whether they're wage increases or normal salary increases, to prescribe those raises. It is also the board's obligation to collectively bargain with representatives of faculty and staff who are members of collective bargaining units. We are now engaged in, or have begun, the initial process, the commissioner's staff, for collective bargaining with 25 collective bargaining units to negotiate and renegotiate 25 collective bargaining agreements. The commissioner's staff seeks at this time Board of Regents guidance, your thoughts or vision on the nature of a sound pay proposal, the characteristics of a pay package that you believe you would be able to ratify and support when the Commissioner's office brings back to you in September the first of the tentative agreements that we would anticipate reaching with labor organizations over the summer. It is the sense of the Commissioner's staff, based partly on historical perspectives or priorities of the board, but also informal discussions individually, that when we think about what are characteristics of a sound pay proposal, or what kind of general guidance would the board give to the commissioner as we proceed through the spring and the summer of a compensation position, we would suspect that the board perhaps would have a priority that the proposal or the position of the Board of Regents in bargaining for pay be a proposal that is equitable, to maintain some semblance of fairness across the system, but also a proposal that is flexible to address campus-specific, campus-level needs. Like I said, based on our sense, we would anticipate that board guidance or expectations would be to advance a proposal that is affordable to keep tuition prices level, but also a proposal that is effective with regard to improving or supporting or helping our ability, the ability of campuses to recruit and retain capable faculty and staff to serve students so well, like our faculty and staff do. So in a general sense, we have rolled the three bullets, I think, under this discussion into one discussion. And I would leave it to the board to give us such guidance in terms of your priorities and objectives.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Buchanan.
Kevin, thank you. What resources are we talking about? We're talking about only the funds that were appropriated in the pay plan? Or what are we delegating you authority on here?
The anticipating that as we move forward, we are spending the House Bill 13 funds. We usually are in an environment where that goes, the House Bill 13 pay plan funds are the lion's share of the equity side of that discussion. In the past years, the regents have oftentimes had a priority for some kind of across-the-board normal salary increase, for instance, for equity across the system. oftentimes in the other part of the balance to address specific campus level needs. Sometimes there are, it's a relative small proportion of total funding spent on pay, but whether it goes towards things like inversion compression within faculty salaries or merit or market, essentially the campus looks within its existing budget and resources, current unrestricted funds for employees covered by current unrestricted funds. So in a sense, perhaps there are times where either finding campus savings or whatever way you would kind of look at how the expenditure is calculated, perhaps some of it does go over into House Bill 2 funding, general operations funding. But the lion's share of any pay adjustment in any given year, at least in our history, has been a combination of House Bill 13 funding and tuition adjustments. So in this era, without any tuition adjustments, we are looking at House Bill 13 funding, but also recognizing that while we greatly appreciate the support that we received in House Bill 13, we also know that perhaps it didn't go quite as far as we wish it would have. So that's the kind of guidance that we look for from the regents right now in terms of what your objectives are as we move forward.
I know there was, thank you, I know there was language from the legislature to the executive giving some directive to try to compensate for pay for some members of the state employee pool that did not get raises around the last time. There was a conversation about certain broadband raises that certain employees were eligible for, and some attention was meant to be given to that. Could you maybe articulate that and see,
Yes.
are we under the same expectation?
Madam Chair and Regent Buchanan, we are not, because the legislature was focusing on and speaking to the non-university system executive branch agency pay plan that has a broadband system, and how to some degree in those other executive branch agencies, they applied raises this past biennium to a fraction or not across the board to some agencies, but not others. So some state employees outside the university system got pay adjustments and others didn't. The legislature's guidance was for those agencies to at least look to people who did not get adjustments last biennium first. The other piece of the guidance was to make some effort to not forget and to focus on what we can do from a cost of living standpoint for staff who are maybe on the lowest end of the pay scale. And that was some of the guidance from the legislature as well, but not a strict prescription. And among our objectives in the university system include the fact that we are looking at right now implementing an adjustment in the entry ranges of the lowest wages for classified staff. So that is at least consistent with some of the concern and the sentiment that the legislature asked agencies to think about as we proceed towards pay, and the fact that a good share of the compensation package is to be spent on 10% annual adjustments in the employer's contribution towards health insurance. That will be a flat dollar amount that the employer's contribution goes up. So because that is an equitable amount across all employee groups, it has an impact of being an amount that is a benefit that is proportionally a larger percentage benefit for folks on the lower end of the scale as well. So we do think that we are proceeding already with the bases covered on what the legislature's directives, or if not directives, preferences or desires were that they expressed to agencies moving forward.
Thank you. We did give raises last biennium. We rose tuition to get the money that time. Was that equitable? Was that dispersed equitably across all of our classified staff?
It was. There was both a wage and a normal salary increase that was consistent across the board, with the exception of, like I said, that I will call a smidgen of an amount that is available then for some campus-specific needs as well, to fund perhaps fix some inversion and compression, or market or merit. But all of the other adjustments across the system that the board approved in this last biennium were equitable.
Thank you. The only thoughts I'd have, and I'm interested in hearing what everybody else has as far as priorities. I mean, I think that we need to constantly, we hear about vacancies that are putting stress, in particular on the campuses where large amounts of growth are occurring. And I mean, this seems like a pool of resources that we could apply to try to alleviate some of those stress points. I also think that as we've talked a lot about the increase in benefit expense, the increase in contribution that employees are going to be making to their retirement plan as part of this new the new package through the pension discussion at the legislature, I don't necessarily believe it needs to all go to wage. I mean, if we're able to help alleviate some of the stress associated with those elevated expenses, that would be very consistent with what I'd like to do. And then I know that I and others have consistently prioritized the compression and inversion issues over just general pay wages. So I think where those issues are most acute, I would certainly be in favor of weighting the way that we allocate money towards addressing those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Teal.
I don't know if this has already been answered, but I've never been able to really get a sense of how much the final allocation changed from the initial request. Could you quantify that for me? I mean, in House Bill 13 for the university system.
Madam Chair, Regent Teal, if Commissioner Christian doesn't have that number memorized, I might ask Regent Robinson. I know we took a bit of a decline. In the end, we were hoping for about an $8 million recovery, and we did not get it.
I think I can answer. Some of it, Regent Teal, goes back to, you know, the state share, resident population share, all those conversations. So the real answer that I think you need to that question is, frankly, the number going in wasn't exactly where we needed it to be. And that's sort of a product of the way that budget was created. We were very fortunate in that we didn't lose a lot of ground on that, because I think early on we identified to legislators that, you know, sort of how that number fit us as a system. And you get into the student or the resident share, non-resident share, and that's partly what Regent Buchanan was asking also, where does all the money come from, which is, some of it is House Bill 13, but we've always had to look for a non-resident portion of that at other sources. And generally that's been why even in times when we've held the line on tuition, we've had some non-resident tuition increase as part of, I mean, it's the majority of what we're talking about today when you get to tuition and fees later. So, you know, it's a real complicated answer to that question. We didn't lose a lot of money, and frankly, we didn't lose as much as most agencies did, because we identified early on that share was not exactly where we wanted it to be. And even that gets a little bit complicated, because we've always had some debates of whether WUI students are included or not in some of those pieces. So I think we have a good number, but it, you know, like all of the pay plan was reduced from our original request. And so ours was frankly reduced before the session started by virtue of the state share, state percentage number that was put in. And so it wasn't reduced further as much as some of the other numbers, but it still left us in a similar spot to the other agencies, which is short of where we originally wanted to be.
Just a follow-up question. I mean, considering the differences in proposed non-resident tuition increases, if we are backfilling or do decide to backfill some of the I guess, non-resident share of that calculation, how does that work? I don't understand those mechanics.
The state is only, I mean, of a salary of one FTE, the state only funds some portion of that, and that's the way it's always been, whether it's 78% without WUI or 72 or 82% with it, or state share around 40%. And so we've got the other side of the pie we've always had to look to, and generally we have looked to non-resident tuition to find that funding. I mean, we've got the two sources, either state appropriations or tuition. So we use non-resident tuition to fill the non-resident piece of that equation.
So I guess my question was, we have differing increases on different campuses in non-resident tuition. Some don't increase at all, some increase, 3.5%. So that, That's what.
And that's back to sort of where do we find the money? I mean, some of it comes within House Bill 13, and some of it has to come from other sources. That other sources, to be honest with you, is broad, and it's very campus specific. We'd almost have to go through campus to campus to tell you how each campus administrator can get to a balance point on that. There's just not one answer that can.
Thank you. Regent Tuss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps a question, Kevin. How do we determine, Regent Buchanan has a great question, how do we determine system-wide the compression and inversion, how big of a problem or an issue that is versus a kind of a general pay increase for everybody in the system? How would we come to some reasonable notion of what that looks like in terms of allocating the limited resources that we have perhaps to both of these really important issues?
Madam Chair, Regent Tuss, usually it's kind of been an approach that has first assumed that we should try to spread resources available for normal salary increases or normal wage adjustments as far and wide as we can, given what we know about the relative compensation levels of our faculty and staff with regard to competing employers. So, you know, when you know that your average full professor salary in Montana ranks last in the nation, you have pretty good reason to believe that if you have some funds that are available for across-the-board adjustments, you try to stretch those as far as you can, and that's what we've done. The inversion problem exists primarily on two campuses. The compression problem, when we're talking faculty salaries specifically, is also rampant on two campuses and then a few more than two campuses. The approach that the Regents took in this current biennium, when the Regents authorized some across-the-board adjustments in October of 2011 and October of 2012 on the two campuses that have the most egregious inversion or compression problems. We also, Bozeman and Missoula, I mean, to tell you specifically, we had roughly $100,000 a year commitment on both of those two campuses to look at either the worst inversion problems or the worst market problems, and tried to reach as many people with those $100,000 a year pools. And had a formula where we worked with faculty and their representatives to spend that. So usually you have an amount that is the normal salary increase and the normal wage increase. And like I said, that extra amount to meet campus-specific needs is a relative smaller amount, but tries to go to the most urgent needs.
Regent Krause.
Thank you. I don't know that I have any questions right off the bat. I always like this. We're going to be fair and reasonable, so maybe I'll try to be unfair and unreasonable for a little while. Usually that argues, when people talk about that, they're arguing for treating everybody the same, which to me is generally not a fair thing. I have a book in my library somewhere, A Far Cry from Fair, and it's about taxation policy. And one of the things you learn about taxation policy after a while is fairness is in the eye of the beholder. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I think are important, one of which is that we're sustainable at the end of the biennium, that we haven't overpromised so that when we get in front of the legislature in 2 years, we have given raises that are, the end result of which is a huge amount that we have to go to the legislature and ask for. So that worries me a little bit. The rates of which boost that up rather than sustainable over the 2-year period. So that would be one. Another one, I think the compression and retention issue is significant. We talked a lot these last 2 days about performance, and I think that rewarding performance is an issue that I would like to leave some money up to the various campuses to deal with. And then we talked a lot about student completion. And I have heard from the faculty, that there are areas, there are holes in instruction where students have a very hard time in getting the class that they need to complete their curricula on time. So if there are holes in math or English or those core classes that people are trying to take and can't take and sets them back a year, those seem to be things that we should allow the universities themselves to address as well. That argues for some amount of holdback from the across-the-board thing. And then I think one of the other things that I see, admittedly, I'm in Bozeman, and it is very expensive to live there. And what happens is people that are the administrative clerk, assistant ones, and the custodians, and the program coordinator ones, and right up through the sort of the program coordinator two, and right in there. They can't live in the city, they're commuting 20 miles, 10 miles, leaving because they simply can't afford to live there. And so giving a percentage, just making a deal that's just percentage, results in people who make very little money to begin with getting a very little percentage increase. And I know that the last time, I think it was authorized to do $500 a year. That, to me, had a lot of merit, a super lot of merit in addressing those. Probably wasn't much. I think Kevin said token, but it did help some. I think when I sit there, and this is one of my jobs, and calculate percentage increases and figure out what we're paying everybody, that was. That helped. I was happy you did that, and it was before I was on the Regents. I would be happy to do that again. So, those are some of my thoughts. Take it for what it's worth. I actually think it is fair and reasonable, but it's not so necessarily equal across the board.
Thank you, Regent Krause. Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a comment and then I have a question. My comment first is related to what Regent Krause was talking about. I think your point is well taken about an across-the-board percentage increase. Sometimes the word equity is used within that, but it isn't always. Just in the same way that you take a budget and you decrease it by 5% across the board without evaluating any of the programs for the strengths and the weaknesses. So I think, it's important to keep that in mind. That said, one question I do have to Mr. McCray is within our system now to determine what type of increase there is to salaries and wages, is there any way for campuses to reward performance at this point?
The two primary performance components to pay, one for faculty and one for staff. With faculty, most campuses, or at least if not most campuses, the campuses that employ the vast majority of faculty in the system do have campus-specific merit programs. So competitive merit-based opportunities for base pay adjustments that have gone a long ways towards helping to recruit and retain faculty, and they are select. It's it's not as if it goes to 49% of the faculty every year. It's much smaller, much smaller. With the classified staff in the Board of Regents Montana University System Staff Compensation Plan, there is a component that in recent years maybe is not used as much because of some of the fiscal crunches, but a non-base one-time performance incentive or bonus. That is a little bit different than the faculty merit program that I described, because it's really used far less, and it requires, a situation for a staff member to really extraordinarily, and because of some unique situation, demonstrate an effort that rises above and beyond the call. But also within the staff compensation guidelines, there is a component that does allow, if a staff member capably and successfully grows in the job and takes on higher level duties and responsibilities, that doesn't necessarily reach that point of triggering, a reclassification, going from, as Regent Krause said, a program coordinator 1 to a program coordinator 2. There's an in-range progression amount of a smaller amount that, in a way, is a performance or a merit approach for classified staff.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's important to know that as we consider our discussions here coming up with performance-based funding, I think some of our discussions need to include what's happening with faculty and staff as well, and across the board. I think that needs to be in the long-term planning. And with that in mind, I think it's important to have some standard, some equitable standard in moving forward with the negotiations. And I think that it is important to do similarly as we did 2 years ago in moving forward. I think it is important to, and that is having a something that's across the board with each of the bargaining units that you're working with. And keeping in mind the funding that we have available through House Bill 13. I think we certainly do have to backfill at times, but I think we're also incumbent to utilize the funds that we have and try to maximize their use. I know that in many cases, the salaries for faculty and staff are not what they should be when you compare it across the nation, but I think this is what we're charged with the money that we have available. So I think that's important to keep in mind. The other area that I think is important is, as Regent Buchanan said, with the compression and inversion, I think that's something that we're always going to have to find a way to have an allotment for that in order to make sure that we're able to make up some of those differences that have happened over the years. So that's what I would be asking for and looking for as we move forward with the negotiations.
Thank you. Regent Robinson. Regent Teal.
Thank you. Just one thought that I wanted to add to this conversation, all of which I think is right on spot. And this is specific to probably faculty at more of the research institutions. And that's, I think, one area that is very costly for us on a staff and compensation side is retention of research faculty, simply because replacing one of those faculty members, having new startup costs, and also potentially losing out on the grants that they bring to a university for a while is very, very expensive. And so related to that, I would be in support of considering ways that we can, in policy or in this or in how we negotiate over the next year or two, look to retention of those faculty in particular. Providing flexibility to campuses where possible, so that if they have an all-star faculty member who's perhaps, paying a salary and grants many times over, we're able to retain them and avoid becoming sort of a feeder institution for larger research universities.
Excellent conversation. I guess I want to just begin any feedback I would offer and begin with the piece that in regards to most of what will happen over the course of the next few months, it will happening through collective bargaining. I think as we talk about performance funding, Regent Robinson hit the nail on the head. I think that it's going to be part of a long-term strategy, a long-term plan, and it needs to be part of a conversation that perhaps starts today involving the faculty and staff, because ultimately that has to be brought into the negotiations, into those collective bargaining agreements. So you're right on there, Regent Robinson. To speak to one of the other issues, I think it's very important in our direction to make sure that we provide an avenue for strong recruitment and retention, and I think that's what Regent Krause was getting to with the base piece. I think that's maybe what avenue you were going down. Additionally, I would say that we need to address the issues of compression and inversion. I think where the most challenges are, and where the greatest need exists, and I still look forward to working with CUF in that roadmap. That's still there. I know we got waylaid, but let's pick it up and see what work we can get done. And I thank you, Sandy, and your team for your efforts in leading that conversation. And then finally, I think it's very important that we have a pay plan, and I think I hear this coming out from all of the regents here at the table, one that is affordable and will help us keep tuition level low. So I think that is the advice and the direction that I would give you, Mr. McCray, and I thank you for the good work that you do and the time that you put in into building rapport and relationships with our bargaining units across the state of Montana. I know that you spend a great deal of time on the road and on the phone, and I appreciate all of those efforts. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would like to say thank you very much, and I also, the folks on the campuses who were part of those 25 collective bargaining teams know this individual well, but you also employ a human resource and labor relations specialist in the Commissioner's office, and that's Jackie Salveson, and she really carries the load on 15 collective bargaining agreements for classified staff. So the regents have put a good team in place in the Commissioner's office, and we're appreciative of that. Thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Just one last thing, and it goes back to that we end up sustainable. One of the, so I hear talk about backfill all the time, and so I'm going to personalize this, what backfill means to me, and it kind of means that you toss me off the lifeboat so the rest of you can row on. And so we're talking about people, and getting providing services to students and programs to students, and I hate to see it when we have to close those things down and we lose programs and departments and because we're going overboard and counting on backfill, because the backfill is a really sharp pencil that cuts. I guess I'd say it that way.
President Engstrom.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we're all interested in two very important concepts here that in some way are in opposition with one another. We're all interested in efficiency and the most cost-effective delivery of education that we possibly can. We're also, though, interested in providing Montana's students with the most competitive education that we possibly can, so that when they go out in the world, whether it's in Montana or across this country or around the world, they come out with an education that positions them to be as competitive as they possibly can in that world. we're in the people business, and I don't know, Kevin, what our percentage is. Is it 70% of our budget spent on people, essentially? Maybe even more than that. So it is the most fundamental investment that we can make in delivering that competitive education to our students. And so I don't know where on that spectrum of cost effectiveness and competitiveness we'll need to end up. But we do have to keep that competitive side of it in mind and recognize that it's the faculty and the staff that are there on the front lines with our students on a day-to-day basis, providing them with the most competitive education that they can. So I urge you to do everything you possibly can as a system to help us maintain competitive people so that we can provide the best education for our students we possibly can. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Engstrom. Regent Buchanan.
Yeah, thank you. Kevin, quick question. We're talking about the bargaining units. How many of our employees roughly are represented by bargaining units, and how many are not on a percentage basis?
Across the system?
Yeah.
Slightly less than half of your current, or about half of your current unrestricted funds are bargaining unit members.
Okay, then I think one thing is I certainly think parity with whatever decisions are made on both sides there, because those that don't have the benefit or that representation, I think they're employees of ours just as well, and we need to take care of them just as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then that completes that conversation. Mr. McCray? Okay. Now we are at the point in the agenda where we will examine the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like to have pulled? Okay. Then we will take action on the consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. A motion has been made to approve the consent agenda. Is there any board comment? Questions? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? A motion has been made to... Thank you. Good catch.
So the consent agenda item was the MSU RP program, is that correct?
There's a bunch of items.
Yeah, okay. So I'd like to make a comment on the MSU RP program, if I
Yes,
could.
please.
Okay, my name is John Newmeyer. I'm Chair of Faculty Senate at MSU Bozeman. I wanted to first of all say thanks to OCHI staff and the legislators for changing the name from ORP to MSU RP. This has been the only retirement program for faculty for 20 years, and the ORP name was misleading, to say the least. MSU RP is a defined contribution retirement program. That's to say the state of Montana has no financial liability to the retiree in this program. Of the 4,300 people who are active employees in the MUS system, 89 who are eligible for this particular program, 89% of them are in the MSU RP program. So despite this lack of financial responsibility to retirees in the MSU RP, the state, or the MUS contribution of about 6% is the lowest among state universities in our region. We're thankful for this contribution. However, it makes hiring and retention difficult. Also, it will lead to faculty retiring later in their careers. So further support from OCHI staff and the Board of Regents to incorporate improvements to the MSU RP program is important for the health of the MUS system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a good piece in there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Regents. Marco Farrow from MMFT. Madam Chair, I think, is this appropriate time to do public comment for,
This is just for the consent agenda item.
Okay, I'll be back.
Thank you. Any further public comment on the consent agenda? Any further public comment? Then we have completed public comment on the consent agenda items before us. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. Now we are at the point in the agenda for public comment on the staff and comp pieces.
Madam Chair, members of the Regents, I'm back, yes. Marco Farrow, MMFT. Thank you very much, and thank Kevin, for the discussion and for having the opportunity to have an open door policy with us to talk about these things. And so I'm going to just mention a little bit, and I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Professor Newmeyer said about the former ORP, and talk a little bit about that because I think it is very important to the entire package of recruitment and retention. As you know, MEMFT has historically had a bill sponsored in the legislature to increase that, and we have been partners in trying to do that in the last couple of legislatures, and we were last successful in increasing that percentage in 2007 by 1%. We've been trying again ever since. In fact, this session, House Bill 253, sponsored by Bill McChesney from Miles City, was alive in the session for quite a long time in the retirement subcommittee that was created. And so there was, we kept talking about it, but, the monumental task of working on the defined benefit contribution plans really was difficult, and it did take the lion's share. I just want to give you a little history about the work on that. I mean, we started that process about 2 years ago in the interim to try to figure out a way to solve the PERS and TRS liability problem. During the session, our office was involved in that on a daily basis. In fact, one of our staff members was almost entirely dedicated to that during the session, and we had weekly meetings with legislators, members, the retirement system staff to try to educate people along the way. Ultimately ended up in what we think is a very good solution with support of the governor. And for those two systems, I would invite you in this interim to be partners with us to try to come up with the same strategy for the ORP. I think we're going to be fine, hopefully, with the system, the defined benefit systems going forward, but we do need to address this ORP issue holistically. You have expertise on your board. Regent Buchanan, this is your business. We would love to have have you sit down with us and talk about strategies for selling to the legislature an increase in this defined contribution plan. It's very, very important to our members and to all that work in the university system. So that's an open invitation to your staff, Mr. Commissioner, Madam Chair, to your board members to work with us, and we would devote resources to that in the interim. I think we can do it. I think it's especially in light that we don't have these huge holes in the defined benefits. So I bring that to your attention, and then I would like to introduce you to Dr. David Shively. He is our University Faculty Association President at the University of Montana, and he is our new CUF chair, and he would like to say a few words about some things about compensation and so forth. And if you have questions of me, please let me know. David?
Thank you, Mr. Farrell.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you, Marco, and thank you all. First, I want to introduce myself. Beyond what Marco had provided, I'm a professor of geography at the University of Montana. I study and teach in the areas of geography, of course, community and environmental planning, and water resources management and policy. My students and we all study really hard. I wanted to also thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing the work that Sandy Osborne, Professor Osborne, has done on behalf of CUF, which is the Coalition of Union Faculty. I wanted to also reiterate what has been said about the need to partner to try to solve some problems that we have with inversion compression, which more broadly stated has to do with the position of Montana faculty well below, meaning at the bottom, in a national context. So that is a situation that we have to address, but we also have to address the immediate needs of faculty and staff, of course. And so it's important to think about inversion compression as something maybe a little bit different than the need for normal salary or across-the-board increments, right, which help us to get by day to day. And so we look forward, CUF looks forward on behalf of the faculty associations on the campuses to working with the Board of Regents and the Commissioner's Office staff and the legislature and MEA, MFT, and our administrations at our universities to try to work towards a situation in the future. This will take some longer-term planning to where we can be able to convince a legislature that maintaining the quality of the Montana University system will require more investment. And this is in order to keep our system affordable and accessible to our students, which is certainly a great need, one of the great challenges in higher education today. Should mention that I do study higher education as well. So I think that those are a couple of important things to keep in mind. Also, really importantly, this issue with our defined contribution retirement plan, as Marco had pointed out and Dr. Neumeier, this is the other stool, or leg of the stool, so to speak, that helps to recruit and retain faculty, and also provide faculty the opportunity to retire at a meaningful point in their career and pass the reins on to new faculty who will hopefully be recruited into the system. Our retirement plan is similarly last in the nation in terms of the level of state contribution to that plan. And that's something that we have to make some progress on. When we are interviewing faculty who come to campuses, we typically talk about the compensation issue. We talk about a number of different benefits. Rarely does a discussion get to the retirement plans. And if they were to see the retirement plans, that's an additional hurdle because that is the long-term perspective. And that's one that we have to have. So again, CUF, the faculty associations, MEA, MFT, and the universities would like to partner with you in helping to make progress in future legislative sessions towards solving this problem. I think we have the opportunity with the fixes that were made to the TRS and the PERS, and our faculty which is the majority of faculty, really want to see that same level of attention and commitment to solving the differential in terms of the state contribution to this particular retirement plan. So I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions from me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for your
Thank
work
you.
and thank you for your leadership on CUF. Thank you very much. Is there further public comment? Sandy?
Sandy Osborne, Montana State University. I want to back us up a bit, and I'm looking and glad to see that Major Robinson is back among us. And the reason for that is he was chair of the Staff Compensation Committee and called a meeting for us at the Museum of the Rockies. It was February a year ago. And it was at that meeting when there was representatives from professional staff, the professional group, the staff group, and the faculty group from around the state. And both President Engstrom and President Cruzado made impassioned pleas about how much money has to be found somewhere to bring us up to where we need to be. And it wasn't just faculty, it was also staff and professionals. I want to make that clear. And I was thinking and reflecting on that at our CUF meeting last week, because that was really the impetus of how we started thinking about things in a different way, if you will. And then it was this year, also in January or February, that Commissioner McCrae contacted me to say, let's sit down and have a meeting with. And it was CUF, and it was looking at salary compression issues system-wide. And it was a great open exchange. And Angela McLean, Regent McLean was with us also, as were administrators from the campuses. And so again, that was a great opportunity for discussion and dialogue. And so because of the decertification vote at MSU, I'm no longer able to continue in the role I've had previously, and I have disappointment in that, of course. But I'm proud of the work that I think, if I go back to Regent McLean and others, that started, Major Robinson, Regent Robinson and others. I think we're on a good path, is my point. I think we're on a good path, and I'm looking forward to that continuing. I also want to shout out a little bit, looking while Denise is here, that the Bozeman paper this morning reports that if you have a master's degree and 18 years of teaching, you make $70,887, as Bozeman Education Association just settled their contract. I don't make $70,887. I've been at MSU 26 years. A lot of our high schools in Montana pay more than our universities, and I think that's something we need to really look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And we look forward to working with you once again at the table in a different capacity. Further public comment? Thank you. Then this concludes that part of the Staff and Compensation Committee, and so now we will make the transition into the Budget Committee. And so Mr. Robinson will be joining us up here at the table. Members of the board, the first item before us is item A, the performance funding model. At this time, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. A motion has been made. Are there questions and comments from members of the board? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? Okay, a motion has been made. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. Now we are on to item B, the construction of the technology modular unit at the University of Montana. At this point, I would entertain a motion.
Move approval.
A motion has been made. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? Thank you. A motion has been made. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. Regent Buchanan, we're on item C of the budget. The next item is item C, the renovation of the restrooms at Prospector Hall at Montana Tech. At this time, I would entertain a motion. A motion has been made. Are there questions and comments from members of the board? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? A motion has been made. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The same sign? The motion carries. Now we're on to item D, the pool replacement efforts at Montana Tech. I would entertain a motion. Thank you. A motion has been made. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Is there public comment?
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name's Kyle Hoggett, and I am the president at Montana Tech. I just wanted to touch on this a little bit with some information that was not given yesterday. During lunch with you guys, I spoke about our Senate elections and how we had record turnout for that. And one of the reasons was because we also had a referendum for the pool. And we had 423 students vote on this, and that was about 15%. And usually with any of our elections, we're looking at about 7 to 10% of student input. So it was great to have that many students vote on this. The first question was, what would you like to see with the hyper pool space done? And 330 out of the 423 were in favor of a pool space. And the next question was, if the funds were to be put forth, would you be willing to pay a $20 fee to maintain and operate the pool properly? Which is something that the pool in the past did not have. And about 75% of that 423 voted yes, we'd be willing to pay a fee for that. So I just wanted to let you guys know that the pool has been a big issue this year and that there is student support behind this. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Great and valued information. We appreciate it. Further public comment? Further public comment? Thank you. A motion has been made then. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. Now we're on to, actually, I'm going to go, like we did yesterday, to the consideration regarding the financing projects at MSU. And for a conversation on that, I'm going to turn to Terry Least and make sure that we have Michael Stevenson, who really truly made a midnight run here yesterday, last night to get here, to just add some information to the conversation. So, Mr. Least?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Yeah, I certainly do appreciate the discussion yesterday and understanding, the risks and the opportunities of this particular proposal. Michael Stevenson, who is our president and chief executive officer of the MSU Alumni Foundation, did indeed make a midnight run here last night to help address some of the questions that Regent Buchanan had. And with that, I will introduce Michael Stevenson.
Thank you, Terry. Madam Chairman, Board of Regents, I appreciate the invitation. Today, I tell you, when I got the call late yesterday afternoon from President Cruzado asking if I could be here today, I learned about 3.5 years ago that the right answer is always yes, ma'am. And I'd like to note that Terry Least is the only one not laughing at this table, so he understands where we're coming from. On the lighter side of this, I can't think of a better place that I'd want to be on a Friday before Memorial Day weekend. I just have to say that on our Great Falls campus. It is my distinct privilege to serve as the president and CEO of the Montana State University Alumni Foundation. And for those of you that are familiar with our organization, it's actually 3 entities. Our Alumni Association, a dedicated team that rallies 145,000 alumni friends who are championing our university. Our foundation team, who stewards and grows about $180 million worth of assets to advance Montana State University, and our innovation campus team, a team dedicated to helping to strike out on private-public partnerships in order to advance Montana State University. 3 organizations committed to one mission: create lifelong relationships, strengthen our resources to advance Montana State University. Today, I wanted to share with you a bit of perspective as it relates with how our organization makes decisions and what drives the decisions that we're making in order to support our campus. So what's the opportunity that's in this action item here? As many of you know, about 18 months ago, we received a very generous contribution from a donor in Denver, Colorado, Jake's Jabs, when he committed $25 million, which is an unrestricted gift to Montana State University, and it was the university's administration that chose to leverage this gift in order to build a building for our new College of Business and Entrepreneurship. A few months earlier, prior to that, Jake had also committed a $3 million gift in order to support and advance the Entrepreneurship Center on our campus. Once again, an unrestricted gift that is at the discretion of the campus in order to advance the Center of Entrepreneurship at Montana State University. Then looking at the opportunities that the university has as it relates with getting access to financing that would have favorable rates. I want to point out that this right here is an opportunity where you have the opportunity to leverage financial strength. And when you listen to, and I see the agenda that the board has been considering over the past few days, rarely are you talking about leveraging financial strength in order to create more opportunities, but rather how do you manage and maximize and optimize the limited resources that you have. This proposition, there's 2 of them that we're looking at here. Either we take the money that has been given to us and we build the building, or we could take those monies, invest those monies, leverage the market situation, which would bring us into reasonable financing, and potentially have a building as well as a sizable endowment that would be able to support the College of Business and Entrepreneurship on our campus. A little bit about our organization. How are investment decisions made at the Alumni Foundation, and who makes these decisions? My bosses and my organization is governed by a board of governors, 18 dedicated individuals in pursuit of advancing our university. There are 8 experienced professionals that serve on our investment committee And these individuals have the fiduciary responsibilities of managing the assets of the Alumni Foundation. My role as the president and CEO is to carry out their instructions. I have investment policies, I have investment guidelines, I have investment procedures that have been, that guide us as it relates with how we invest, how we distribute those investments to campus, and how we manage the resources of our organization. We have an investment plan. That plan discusses the asset allocation, the diversification, the rebalancing schedule, what does a qualified investment manager look like, and what kind of performance should we expect from that manager, and what are the benchmarks so that we know that we're being successful in what we do. Who's in the room when those decisions are made? We have the Board of Governors. We have the University Administration. We also have retained the Council of Monticello, who is an investment consultant that assists us with our due diligence. Based out of Denver, Colorado, Monticello has 154 clients, and they have $58 billion that are under advisement with that organization. How do we know that we've been successful? Earlier this year, we received a NUCUBO Common Fund report that is the study of endowments. This is an annual report that is distributed in the early part of the year. NUCUBO and the Common Fund represent 831 endowments and affiliated foundations. A third of those foundations look like we do. They're public. Foundations that support public entities. Collectively, they manage $405 billion in their endowments in order to advance education. From an industry standpoint, as of June 30th, 2012, you look at the 10-year performance average, which I would remind everyone included the 2002 downturn, the 2008 downturn. These organizations still booked a 6% return on an annual investment. Prior to 2008, the 10-year returns averaged anywhere between 8 to 12%. Every January, leaders from these organizations gather at the Association of Governing Boards Foundation Leadership Forum. This last year it was in Florida. There's a very important session there where they were talking about the risks that are now associated with how we're investing and how we're managing these resources. The forum that I remember the most was the Global Investment Climate and the Impacts of Endowment Management Forum. There were 3 experts that were sitting on the stage. The first was the Director of Institutional Investments that represented the U.S. Trust Bank of America. The second was the CEO of Common Fund, 1,500 clients, $24 billion of resources under management, an individual that was born and raised in Havre, Montana. The individual moderating the session was the former managing director of the Weyerhaeuser Pension Fund Investment Group, the founding co-head of Morgan Stanley's Alternative Investments Partners, and a graduate of the Wharton School of Business MBA. And the 2 observations that I made is that individual sitting there moderating that session is Corey Polfrey, born and raised in Great Falls, Montana, and is the incoming chair of my Board of Governors. And so there I sat among the minds that were managing $100 billion with one question in front of them. How do we grow these resources, and how do we support our educational institutions? How's our performance been? Presently, the Alumni Foundation manages about $180 million. $131 million of it is invested in our long-term pool. We have consistently performed in the top quartile of our peers, and most recently in the top 10% of our peers. As of March 31st of 2012, our 10-year return is 7.48% annual return. The 17 years that I would consider ourselves to be a major endowment management, our 17-year average has been 8.17%. As we've been able to grow the assets of our organization, we've been able to achieve economies of scale, which has allowed us to grow and to provide more and increased financial support for Montana State University. So what are the risks, and how do we mitigate those risks? When you look at the proposition that's put in front of the Board of Regents today, I'm not going to tell you that it's a riskless proposition, because it's not. There are risks associated with it. But what I can tell you is that as long as we do our due diligence, identify those risks, We can manage those risks by having plans in place as it relates with what our actions will be should adverse situations evolve. I'm here to tell you that the Alumni Foundation is here to follow your lead. It's your decision. The second observation that I made while I was at the AGB forum was when I sat there and I looked at the individuals that manage $100 billion and we listened to their questions and their comments. They're making the same pursuits that you are. They're looking for the prospects of tomorrow. They're telling their students that come, study, get a degree, and you'll experience economic prosperity. You'll be able to draw wealth to your family. You will see a better tomorrow if you invest in higher education. Many of your peers are turning to their affiliated foundations in order to do two things. The first is to balance access for these students while at the same time provide the necessary resources in order to compensate those who make up the university and to make certain that the university is stabilized, sustainable, and moving forward. The second is that they are looking to their affiliated foundations to continue to create economic development opportunities. We are committed to your success in every way and in everything we do. So with that, I would say we will follow your lead. I'd like to open it up for any questions that you might have as it relates with this specific action item.
Thank you for traveling here and for the great presentation. Are there questions or comments? Regent Buchanan.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael, very much for making the trip over. I'm sorry. My sense is that you came over in emergency status, and that was not the intent of the questioning that I think Regent Krause and I were taking yesterday. I had a chance to sit down with Terry and Michael this morning and walk through some of this. And the thing that I think this board needs to understand is we're not approving bonding capacity at the moment. We're approving the due diligence associated with looking into these opportunities. And I think in this environment where, and Clay said this yesterday pretty well, we're demanding creativity from these campuses to generate revenue, and to do due diligence around these things is exactly what we should be doing, and I'm appreciative of it. So, Michael, when you guys prepare this proposal, I think a couple of things that I would really like to see demonstrated to us are as far as the forecasted opportunity that you talk about. I know that a lot of the numbers we're talking about they're not net of expenses. So as we look and weigh what it is we're trying to attempt to do, I certainly want to see a very clear picture as to what you all forecast, including those expenses associated with the management of those funds. And I'm very supportive of the process of doing the due diligence here, and I thank you very much for your comprehensive layout in front of us today.
Just a quick comment. I was not necessarily coming over on emergency status. It was actually our two MSU grads that were asking these questions. So I perceive that as more passion to make certain that we are making the best decisions in support of your alma mater. I would mention that the numbers that we are proposing are net fees that are not within our control, meaning that the fees that are assessed upon us have already been calculated in the numbers that are there. Those fees and assessments that are within our control are part of the conversation as to how we structure this in order to make sure that we mitigate the risks and make create the largest opportunity that we can for our campus.
Thank you very much. Further questions or comments? Regent Krause.
Just, I'm glad you made it up here safely, and I hope you make it safely home. Otherwise, I'm going to feel fairly responsible for that. So I guess some of the things, this is, we're going to approve you investigating this today. I get, and I know that it's tied in with bridge financing as well. I'd like to see how those cash flows work. I'd also like to know if you've done this before. Did we do this with when we built the end zone, for example, or anything else? And so those, and then it'll be interesting to see what kind of instrument you use that avoids the federal, restrictions on making money on tax-free bonds or tax-free borrowing, and how that works in this situation too. So those would be the three, because there's a little bit of legal risk. I perceive a little bit of legal risk right now as well. So
sure, those are things that we will pursue exhaustively. I can tell you that this would be, I believe, the first time in the university system's history that we would be looking at leveraging this particular strategy. Though I can tell you that a lot of our peers throughout the United States have done this very successfully in the past. I would also mention that any of the financing that the university would find their way into, we do not come into possession of that money. So we are not going to be in a situation to where you would secure the financing and then transfer any monies to the foundation. What we're talking about and proposing is that we would continue to own the gifts that have been given by Jake Jebs, invest those, and continue to distribute at rates that would allow the university in order to meet its debt obligations, as well as support the programmatic elements of the College of Business and Entrepreneurship.
And what would be the underlying security for that?
It would be the cash that sits in our organization.
One more quick
Thank you,
question.
Regent Buchanan.
Yeah, thank you. You're going to have to do some sort of financing for this project anyway, aren't we? I mean, regardless if we use this approach.
Regent Buchanan, yes, that is the case.
Great, so maybe in the proposal, just compare it to some alternatives so that we know what we're looking at, and if we're going to be pioneering a brand-new approach here, I mean, let's really make a compelling case that it's worth pursuing, so thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Regent Robinson.
I had a question as well, and it relates to Regent Krause's question. Since you're utilizing these funds, or considering, I guess you're doing the due diligence right now, considering utilizing these unrestricted funds, does it impact the progress of the project itself, or the intent of the donor themselves?
Regent Robinson, thank you. That's an excellent question. I'll just remind everyone that when the donor committed these resources, it was an unrestricted commitment to the university to be used in order to advance the College of Business and Entrepreneurship, and at the university's discretion. And so looking to the Board of Regents, this is well within your discretion as to how you would instruct us to either manage these resources and/or if we were to transfer the resources to you, as to how you would use the resources. We have a lot of flexibility in this. There are no other programmatic commitments for these monies at this point in time. So when we talk about financing an $8.5 million or an $18.5 million project, we've got $25 million worth of resources that we may be able to leverage in order to make that happen. Of course, I wouldn't want to be too conservative in how much we collateralize and lock up and commit for the financing, because there are a lot of needs throughout the college that we would want to make resources available for.
Thank you very much. Further questions?
So then, as far as the phase that the project's in, none of the funds are obligated to any other type of contractors or
At this point in time, President Cruzado's been very frank with the committee that has been involved with developing this project. At this point in time, I believe the Board of Regents has authorized for the project to be in the $18.5 million range, and she has not committed the balance of resources. I can tell you that Jake Jeb's pledge commitment is ahead of schedule as it relates with fulfillment, though that schedule is elongated over a 7 to 10 year period of time. We do have a significant portion of the gift, though, however, in our possession.
Thank you very much. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Mr. Least.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would just like to say thank you for having a little more discussion on this subject today. I appreciate that very much, and you have our full confidence that we will look at this in a much healthier way and bring this back to the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for them to proceed. Thank you. A motion has been made. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? Thank you then. Anything else from the board? We have a motion before us. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. We look forward to hearing what you come up with. Now we'll go back to item E. And before I begin this item and ask for motions on this, just a few remarks. I guess I just want to begin by saying the reason that we're able to freeze tuition as per the cap is because we had two parts to the cap agreement. One was the adequately funded pay plan, and then the second piece was the increase in present law. And that was the mechanism. We did not have in that mechanism anything regarding fees, and I think that the conversation yesterday was a very positive one. And so considering what I just said as to what was built into the cap, I think that the work suggested yesterday by Regent Teal could lead us, I think, to working toward fee increases perhaps being built. I know that there's a lot of nuances there that we need to consider, and perhaps a lot of unintended negative consequences should we do that. But I think it's important to take a look, and should we do it successfully in the future as we negotiate a cap, that can be a part of that conversation. I think that was something that Regent Tuss and I had kind of spoken about in the weeks leading up to this. But that's not the case now. And I just cannot stress enough that in my estimation as we go into this conversation that we have post-secondary education in Montana, and it is a significant value. And so I would open this up right now and tell you that I am prepared in regards to motions, and just from what I heard yesterday, there may be an inclination to have a motion for tuition and a separate motion for fees. And so if I could have what I have here, first of all is I would at this point accept a motion to accept the proposed tuition for resident students for campuses recommending the tuition cap, and accept the proposed tuition increases for resident students as proposed by Miles City Community College, and accept the non-resident tuition increases as proposed. I would entertain that motion.
So moved. Yeah.
Thank you. A motion has been made. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Anything else from the board? A motion has been made. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign? The motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the next motion. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to accept the mandatory fees as proposed and to accept the non-mandatory fees and room and board fees as proposed. Thank you. A motion has been made. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Tuss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question of Mr. Least, if that's okay. Mr. Least, I felt a little rushed yesterday afternoon as you were discussing the concern that you brought to the board's attention relative to this fee conversation and the potential implications, financial implications to our campuses in this system should we go down the road of not approving some of these fees that are before us today in this motion. Could you go into that a little bit more with us? I want to make real clear that I understand what your concerns are from a financial perspective regarding the system.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, Regent Tuss, thank you for this opportunity and for that question. So what I mentioned yesterday was that some of these fees are they're pledged revenues for our debt stream, right? And so that's one concern in relation to the possibility of bringing them under the fold of tuition in the future and not keeping them separate, because our current bond indentures, essentially we would be in violation of those, because those have to be pledged to the revenues first. In addition, there are certain fees here that they don't go toward state-funded, unrestricted operating funded operations, such as our health centers and our student union and those type of things. So if those fees are held back, those are really their standalone operations, and they need to be able to operate in order to provide the services to the students. So those are two considerations. I'm not sure if I've answered all of your questions. If you have something more specific, I'd be glad to answer that.
Thank you. Regent Buchanan.
Just a quick clarification there. You're not talking about pledged revenues as any of the proposed fees. You're talking about existing fees, correct?
Yeah, Regent Buchanan, yes, we're talking on the mandatory fee part. Some of those are pledged, right? Yeah, if you're referring to course fees, program fees, or
I guess what the clarification I'm making is it would make no sense to me that we've not approved a fee that's tied to debt that we've already taken out. So I'm assuming your comments related to stuff that's pledged towards debt service or fees that we've already approved. So the increase in fees that I think we're talking about now, you're talking about the greater conversation that Regent Teal is floating, that we rethink about incorporating fees. So none of those pledged revenues are new fees that we're looking at approving today.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Further questions or comments?
Yes, please.
Yes,
So
Regent
the
Krause.
registration fee that's more or less ubiquitous around the It isn't ubiquitous? Anyway, the registration fee, does that back a bond of any kind? You can answer it, Terry, or anyone can answer it. Maybe there's a side. There's a $30 registration fee, the cover charge to get into the university, and I'm just wondering, does that back a building or an accounting system or anything like that?
Not to my knowledge, that one is not.
Okay.
Nor to mine.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, all right, well, so that's two presidents and a commissioner of higher education saying it's just a fee we tack on.
Thank you. Further questions? President Engstrom.
Regent Kraus, members of the board, while it may not be pledged to a particular bond or something, it is essentially pledged to ongoing operations of the university, and decrease or removal of that particular fee would certainly have profound impact on the operation of the registrarial function of the university. And so, I hope you understand that, dinging any particular fee on here does have implications in terms of our ability to provide services to students. So I just hope that you keep that in mind, and I guess I would further just ask you as a board to think not so much about an individual fee and whether that $30 is the right number for that registrarial fee, but think about the total cost of education and remind ourselves continually of the fact that we are among the leanest systems in the country in terms of providing cost-effective education. And these fees are an important part of providing that education, and we have, I think, been as responsible as we possibly can to keep the fees as low as possible, too, in addition to the 0% tuition. Thank you.
Thank you, President Engstrom. Regent Buchanan.
I think I might need a little bit more clarification. I think what we're approving was much like tuition. If we had not voted on that, tuition wouldn't have gone up. We're agreeing to hold it tight. I don't see us that if we vote these down, that fees are being eliminated. I think all we're approving are the increases in fees that have been proposed. Is that correct?
Regent Buchanan, Madam Chair, that's exactly correct. We're kind of confusing about three different conversations at once. And what I would be willing to do is certainly pledge that we would take yesterday's conversation and the bits and pieces of this one back to my office, and we'll spend some time on how we can approach this and ask the question. And we have done this some in the past, but it's a very good question. Frankly, it's one that I've struggled with since I first came on the board. What should be in fees, what shouldn't? I think to the president's comments, the good thing about it is it sort of dedicates a lump of money to a cause, but, could that be in tuition, to Regent Krause's point? Yeah, and it's not necessarily pledged. We would have to, if we look at this holistically, we would have to try to see what fees have a dedicated spot that they have to be now in terms of pledge, or some of those which look more like tuition, and I think we could do that. I would caution, though, that what you are looking at today is an increase on existing fees, and it is probably concerning to mix those up too much. And if we should have had this conversation, it should have happened a year ago, because one of the problems is we didn't have a new structure involved. So if these fees had been moved earlier into tuition, then when we're talking about present law calculations that we took to the legislature and all of this discussion, those would have presumably been funded with the present law adjustments that we had. So in some ways, we sort of punish ourselves from that extent too, because we have them in a separate silo. And I think we should really take a good earnest look at, are there fees, especially mandatory ones, that should be put into tuition? But we need to do that in the right time frame. So that goes to our legislative proposal in the right sync, and we're not sort of cutting off a finger to save the arm deal. I think we're all on the same page. We will look at this thing in the months to come and see if we should try to make some wholesale changes to how we do it and bring those to the board in time that it would fit nicely into our next budgeting cycle. So if those would move into tuition, they're part of the present law discussion instead of part of a fee increase discussion.
Great, that's exactly how I understood it, and I'm very supportive of that exploration. Thanks for the recommendation. Just a comment on this vote. We're using big language, historic vote, these things this week about freezing tuition, and it's certainly notable that we're doing it. But I think that what's very clear to me where I live, the cost of education is of a huge concern for the people that I talk to. And I think that these types of actions, whether we modestly increase these fees today or if we don't increase them, and it's up to us to vote on here shortly, these are the expectations of the students that we're trying to attract out there, that we're keeping cost low. So as much as it's extremely notable that we have built, I think, which will be the foundation for a great partnership with the legislature and the executive branch moving forward, this is a great model to be emulated as we move forward, freezing tuition. But I think that we also need to be tempering we got to equate what we're doing to the expectations of the market. Students out there are telling us costs of higher education are rising faster than we can keep up with it. And so as we make this vote on the fees, I think that we need to say we're doing something responsible with the tuition freeze, and I would urge you guys to consider that we continue to keep that cost of education to the person who's paying the bills as a top concern. It's certainly one for me.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Mr. Least.
Just one more thing, and I do agree with President Engstrom's comments earlier about the use of these fees, whether they're separated out or whether they're tuition. But I'm wondering historically, because most universities have, say, the registration fee, if there's not some behavioral aspect to that, because there may be a small group of individuals who may register for courses, take up space in a class, and then not actually attend. And if there's no sort of skin in the game with some minor fee, that could cause issues at the last minute with class availability and then they would, sort of cancel out and not show up. So
We just need to look at it.
Absolutely, and look at them in a timely fashion and then build them into any cap negotiations as we move forward. So is there any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? Any further questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, at this time, we have a motion pending. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign? Okay. Did you get that, Lynette? Okay, and what was the outcome? 6-0. I think there was a no.
It was probably 3-2.
Let's do it one more time. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Regent Buchanan, Regent Kraus, are dissenting votes.
Thank you. Okay, at this point now, we will move on to the consent agenda, and we agreed that there were no items that anyone wished to have removed from the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve it. A motion has been made to approve the consent agenda. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? All righty, nothing from the board then. A motion has been made to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we'll take public comment on the items on the Budget Committee agenda. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Okay. Then we will close the Budget Committee agenda. Okay, at this time we will turn to, we have a couple of student residency appeals. Okay. Board members, you have each received the Commissioner's decision in the written appeal with supporting documents submitted by the student. We will address each appeal separately. The issue before the board in each of these is solely to determine whether to hear these appeals at a later meeting. BOR policy does not require the board to entertain these appeals if we are satisfied with the Commissioner's review and decision. These appeals are confidential, so we will not be addressing these students by name. or even identifying the campus involved, nor will we address the facts or the specific issues today. The sole issue of today is whether any regent believes the issues addressed in the commissioner's decision need further review at the board level. If you do not wish to hear a specific appeal at the board level, it is not necessary to make a motion. A lack of action on our part will signify our decision not to hear the case. Are there any questions as to the procedure before we go to the first appeal? I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. There being no motion to hear this appeal, the request that we entertain this appeal is denied. The commissioner's decision is upheld. Now on to Student Residency Appeal 2. I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. There being no motion to hear this appeal, the request that we entertain this appeal is denied. The commissioner's decision is upheld. We are almost there, folks. At this time, we've come to the time in our agenda where we will have the election of officers. At this time, I would open the floor for nominations for the position of chair. Regent Tuss.
Madam Chair, I would move to place in nomination the name of Angela McLean for Chair of the Board of Regents.
Thank you. Are there further nominations?
Madam Chair, I would put into nomination the name of Todd Buchanan for the position of chair.
Thank you. Are there further nominations? Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the board?
You know, coming from the situation I come from, holding elective office, we don't ever get to do but 2 years at a whack, and as mayor of the city of Bozeman, and what it does is it passes the baton every 2 years, and we see a turnover and equality among the individuals, and I think that it serves us very well in that regard. Regent Buchanan is in his 7th year. He is the senior regent here, I believe, and it makes him very well qualified for many of the things that we're approaching now, whether it's performance funding or affordability, and I think he's done a very good job on the issue of the Montana Tech PhD, and I think he really carried the day with that, with his committee, and it has nothing to do with the current chair, but my philosophy, which is reflected in how I serve elsewhere, is that we share, we jokingly refer to Regent Teal as the super regent, but we don't want to create one of those by position, or his is by merit, I would say. and so we don't want to have sort of this case where one of the regents continually over and over again is chair, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And that by sharing that, we each take the role, we each take the responsibility, and then we have the pleasure of giving it up and seeing someone else succeed. And I think that promotes collegiality and it and a spirit of cooperation that sometimes doesn't happen in a bit more hierarchical other forms of government, I would say. And so that's kind of my pitch there. I think his 6 years has really served us well in this past year, and I respect everything he's accomplished this past year. I think he would do a very good job in representing us for his last year.
Thank you very much, Regent Krause. Regent Teal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that I really agree with a lot of what Regent Krause just said. I think that what I valued most on this board has been the collegiality and the opportunity for all of us to approach each other in the realm of ideas rather than the realm of ideology. And I think that we've done a very good job of that in my estimation. And I hope that no matter the outcome of any election, that that philosophy and that ethic continues. And Regent Buchanan, I want to let you know I really respect you, and I think that you've done some incredible things on this board. I did have one question which, in relation to your nomination, I just kind of caught me up, was your term expires in February, correct? So that's just one concern I have. I think that you found some incredible ways to contribute, but I think it would be good, partly for that, the ethic of, we aren't going to have someone solidified in the position of chair year after year, to have someone in the position of chair who can be around long enough to maybe mentor the next person. And that's one concern of mine. But I wanted to let you know that that was my thought process, that's my reasoning. I think that you've done an incredible job, and I've learned a lot from just watching how you work and how you present yourself. So, thank you.
Thank you. Regent Tuss.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to speak to your leadership style. I think you've got a solid leadership style that includes passion, inclusiveness, and obviously effectiveness as we think about what we've been talking about for the last couple of days here and what we as a system were able to achieve in this past legislative session with you at the helm. I sincerely appreciate that, and I think that you'll be equally successful in a second term as our chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Tuss. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Further questions or comments from members of the board? At this time, we will take the vote in the order the nominations were made. The motion was made. Do I need to entertain a motion
I think you could entertain a motion, and then
in regards to my name?
I think you could vote on the candidates in either order, but each board member should only vote one time. I
Okay.
think that'll solve itself.
I'm not touching that one, man. There are some obvious comments that could be made.
My name was
but,
submitted was submitted, I guess, by motion by Regent Tuss. All in favor of Angela McLean being chair of the Board of Regents, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. So then, that vote would carry. So then, do we need to vote if it's a 4? So then, all in favor of, so then if we'll move on to the next name, Regent Buchanan's name was submitted second. All in favor of Regent Buchanan as being chair of the Board of Regents, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The vote for McLean was 4. The vote for Buchanan was 2. Thank you. Now we will move on to the position of vice chair. I will open the floor for nominations for that position.
Madam Chair, I'd love to nominate Regent Kraus, and would love to be very clear as to why. I think policy is very important here, and we articulate often through our votes what's important to us. And cost of higher education is the most important priority to me, and for the first time in quite a few years, I've got a colleague on this board that is a stalwart advocate for that. And I appreciate the comments about collegiality and respect it, because I understand it and recognize it as well. And I think that as we've watched how we vote on things over these years, I'm not offended or hurt at all by the outcomes of this. This is how we vote on everything, it appears to me. 4-2 at this stage, which is a double in the other side of the vote since I joined the board, Jeff, and I'm very appreciative for it. And it comes with pain. It takes strength to be critical of raises to a room full of the people who we're talking about. It takes strength to be a system employee and make decisions that are tough on the system. I'm not going to say that I think anybody here is always right. We vote what we're passionate about. We vote what motivates us, and I just think that Regent Kraus is the voice I want to complement leadership on this board for a couple of very strong reasons I just articulated, but in harmony with Joe's voice here. I just think that as we nurture the future chair of the board or future leadership on this board, I know that the immediate impact that Jeff has already had and can have in a leadership position assures me that all constituents would be heard as an agenda gets drafted, not individual constituents that might carry a stronger voice than others, but the entire state will be listened to. So with great pride, I nominate my friend Jeff Krause as vice chair.
Thank you. Regent Robinson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move forward Regent Tuss as a candidate for vice chair.
Thank you. Are there further nominations? Are there further nominations for vice chair? Okay, so then we will take a vote in the order that those nominations were received. All in favor of Regent Krause being named vice chair of the Board of Regents, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. The two.
The two.
The two vote.
Now on to Regent Tuss. All in favor of Regent Paul Tuss being named vice chair of the Board of Regents, please signify by saying aye. Aye. It's a 4 vote. Congratulations, Regent Tuss. I look forward to working with you at the table and looking forward to our next meeting where I think we're going to have a full 7-member board for the first time in a long time. I thank you also very much for being patient with us as a board as we waded through this agenda with some very historic and some interesting conversations. We look forward to seeing you in the months to come. Thank you for the good work that you do. This meeting stands adjourned.